Hi guys. Tonight we step into a world that no longer exists. A world of cold rivers, dim firelight, quiet animal calls, and ancient footsteps pressed into damp earth. You're standing near a camp 60,000 years ago, where the night air smells of smoke, wet grass, and stone warmed beside flames. Before you settle fully into this journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. It is always strangely comforting to imagine all those little lights across the world, glowing quietly in different bedrooms, different cities, different hours of the night. Now, dim the lights and let the old landscape rise around you. At first, it does not look impossible. There is earth beneath your feet. There is sky above you. There are trees standing dark against the last blue of evening. Somewhere nearby, water moves slowly over stones. You could almost convince yourself that you have stepped into a remote valley somewhere in the modern world, far from roads, far from FMs, far from the small glowing rectangle that has somehow become humanity's favourite campfire. But then you listen more carefully. The birds are not quite the birds you know. The air feels sharper, less softened by the long stable climate your world grew used to. The river follows a course that may not exist today. The forest has a different edge. Open grasslands stretch where later generations might know woodland, farmland, desert, or sea. The map of the world is familiar only in the broadest sense, like a face glimpsed in a dream. You are 60,000 years in the past. Modern humans already exist. That is a mainstream historical fact. Homo sapiens had emerged earlier in Africa, and by this time, some groups were moving through parts of Africa and beyond it, carrying with them tools, language, memory, and the fragile confidence of people who had survived many difficult seasons. But this is not yet the world of villages. There are no fields planted in neat rows, no pottery cooling beside a kiln, no written names, no permanent streets, no kings, no coins, no market squares, no tidy little calendar on a wall telling anyone that winter is being rude again. There are only bands of people moving through a living landscape, learning it slowly, carrying what they can, leaving behind almost nothing except stone, bone, ash, and traces so faint that future archaeologists will spend entire careers trying not to overstate them. You walk closer to the river. The bank is soft under your feet. Cold mud presses between your toes through worn coverings. Reeds whisper in the dark. Insects click somewhere low among the grass. A small fire burns near a cluster of simple shelters, its light orange and restless. The shelters are not houses in the way you know houses. They are temporary shapes made from branches, hides, grasses, and whatever the land has allowed. They lean into the wind. They accept that tomorrow, or next week, or when the animals move, everyone may move too. That is one of the first lessons of this vanished world. Nothing stays because you want it to stay. The people here live by attention. They notice cloud thickness, hoof prints, broken twigs, bird movement, the smell of water, the direction of smoke, the texture of berries, the mood of the old hunter who has seen 3 bad winters and therefore gets listened to even when he complains too much. Especially then, perhaps. You stand near the fire and feel its warmth reach your knees. Someone has placed stones around the flames. A few tools lie nearby, flakes of stone sharp enough to cut hide or meat. Their edges catch the light like little pieces of frozen moon. A woman sits with a strip of animal skin across her lap, scraping it carefully. Her hands move with the calm rhythm of someone doing work that has been done many times before. Beside her, a child watches, sleepy but curious. because childhood here is not separate from survival. It is survival beginning early, quietly, one copied gesture at a time. A quirky detail from deep human history is that some prehistoric tools were so small and finely made that they look almost delicate, yet they could be extremely practical. Tiny stone flakes, bone points, and carefully prepared edges may not seem impressive beside a modern steel knife. But in this world, a good edge is technology, comfort, food, clothing, and occasionally the difference between a hard day and a much harder one. Hear someone laugh softly. It surprises you. The past often becomes too serious in the imagination, as if everyone before agriculture spent every hour staring nobly into the distance. But people were still people. Someone probably told a joke at the wrong moment. Someone complained about the smoke blowing into their face. Someone misplaced a tool and blamed a child, a cousin, or a spirit, depending on the family mood. Gentle sarcasm is not an invention of the internet, though the internet has certainly worked very hard to make it louder. Here, humour is quieter, a smile beside the fire, a teasing sound, a glance that says, yes, you said the weather would improve, and once again, the sky has chosen violence in the form of drizzle. The world around you is not empty. It is full of other lives. Large animals move through the distance, some familiar, some gone forever. Herds follow seasonal routes across grasslands. Predators know the river too. Birds lift from the reeds in sudden dark shapes. The night belongs to many beings, and humans are not yet the unquestioned owners of the scene. They are clever, social, watchful, and vulnerable. Researchers continue to question exactly how people 60,000 years ago organized their movements across different regions. Some evidence suggests flexible strategies, with groups adapting to coasts, forests, grasslands, and dry interiors in different ways. Other interpretations warn that the archaeological record is patchy, and that what survives may only be a small, uneven whisper of a much richer life. Their uncertainty matters. You cannot simply look at this camp and claim to know everything. You can observe. You can imagine carefully. You can let the evidence guide the dream without pretending the dream is evidence. That is a good rule for ancient history, and probably for reading comment sections too. The fire settles lower. The river darkens. People begin to gather closer, not dramatically, not with ceremony every time, but with the ordinary pull of warmth. Someone adds wood. Sparks rise and vanish. Smoke drifts into the colder air, carrying the smell of burned branches, cooked fat, damp hide, and earth. A child leans against an older woman's side. A hunter repairs a point. Another person looks beyond the shelters toward the black line of trees, listening. You follow that gaze. Beyond the camp lies a world that will not last. Its rivers will shift. Its animals will retreat, adapt, or disappear. Its coastlines may drown beneath seas. Its cold plains may become forests. Its forests may open into dry land. The people who live here do not know that they are walking through a vanished chapter of Earth. To them, this is simply home, difficult and beautiful, stingy and generous, frightening and familiar. You sit down near the embers. The ground is cool beneath you. The fire warms your face. Above, the stars appear slowly, one by one, brighter than almost any stars you've seen in the modern world. No city glow hides them. No aircraft cross them. No satellite slides silently overhead. Only darkness, depth, and the patient lights of the sky. And as you breathe with the camp, you begin to understand the first secret of adaptation. Humans did not survive this lost world by conquering it all at once. They survived by listening, by remembering, by changing slowly enough to endure and quickly enough not to vanish. You remain close to the fire as night loosens its grip on the camp. The stars fade first, not all at once, but slowly, as if the sky is breathing them away. A grey line appears beyond the trees. The river becomes visible again, no longer a black ribbon, but a pale moving surface with mist resting above it. Cold gathers in the low places. It touches your hands, your cheeks, the back of your neck. The warmth from the fire is weaker now, and you understand why morning is not always a relief in this world. Morning means movement. Morning means decisions. The people around you wait quietly. No alarm rings. No one reaches for a phone and immediately loses 20 minutes to mysterious glowing nonsense. Instead, bodies stir beneath hides. Someone coughs. Someone rubs ash from a sleeping place. A child complains softly, then is gently pulled closer to warmth. The fire is coaxed back into life with dry grass and patient breath. This is a cooler world than yours, not frozen everywhere, not a simple world of endless ice, but a planet shaped by unstable climate. Around 60,000 years ago, Earth was within a glacial period, when large ice sheets held water in colder northern regions and sea levels were generally lower than today. That is a mainstream historical fact, and it matters for everything you see here. It matters for the rivers. It matters for the animals. It matters for where humans can walk. It matters for what grows, what disappears, what returns, and what must be remembered. You step away from the camp and feel frost or cold dew clinging to the grass. Each blade bends under tiny beads of moisture. The air smells clean, but not gentle. It smells of wet soil, crushed leaves, smoke, and the faint musk of animals that passed in the dark. Farther away, open land stretches beyond scattered trees. It is not the thick green world many people imagine when they hear the word ancient. This place has edges. Grassland gives way to scrub. Scrub gives way to woodland. Woodland breaks open again. Climate creates this patchwork. The people here understand it through experience, not charts. They do not speak of atmospheric cycles or oxygen isotope records. They know instead that one slope holds berries earlier than another. One valley traps cold air until late morning. One stream dries when the season turns harsh. One distant ridge gathers snow while the lowlands still seem friendly. Their knowledge is not abstract. It has mud on it. It has smoke in it. It has the ache of walking. You follow a small group leaving camp. They move without hurry, but not without purpose. A woman carries a child against her side. Two older children walk behind, alert and quiet for now, which is impressive and probably temporary. A man carries a bundle of tools wrapped in hide. Another person holds a digging stick, polished smooth by use. Everyone wears layers of animal skin, some stiff, some softened by scraping and use. The clothing is not decorative in the modern fashion sense, although people may still care deeply about appearance. It is warmth, identity, skill, memory, and survival stitched together by hands. The ground slopes upward. As you climb, the river drops behind you. Mist lies in pale bands across the water. The camp becomes a low cluster of smoke and movement. From this height, you see how wide the world is, and how little of it is safe by default. Hills roll toward a distant plain. Dark shapes of animals move far away, perhaps grazing. The wind comes across the open ground, carrying a dry bite. You pull your covering closer. This is adaptation in the body. Shoulders hunch against wind. Hands tuck under hides. Feet learn where stones are loose. Eyes narrow toward brightness. People become experts in tiny adjustments, because tiny adjustments repeated every day become survival. A lesser-known detail is that ancient humans may have used not only caves and rock shelters, but also open-air camps in places where materials and weather allowed. We often imagine prehistory as cave life, because caves preserve evidence well and look wonderfully dramatic, very convenient for documentaries. but many people likely spent much of their lives in more temporary shelters that left far fewer traces. The group pauses near a patch of low plants. Someone kneels and brushes aside dry stems. Roots are tested. Some are worth digging. Some are ignored. A child reaches too quickly and receives a soft correction. Not angry, just firm. The lesson is simple. The land feeds you, but it does not label itself helpfully. No little sign says edible, poisonous, bitter, but technically useful if you're desperate. Knowledge must be carried in memory and taught before hunger makes mistakes expensive. You watch the digging stick press into the soil. The earth resists, then opens. Dark roots twist free. They smell sharp and damp. A few are placed into a skin bag. Others are broken, examined, discarded. Small food matters here. Not every meal is a heroic hunt beneath a dramatic sunset. Much of survival is quieter. Roots, seeds, nuts, shellfish where water allows, small animals, eggs, honey if someone is brave and slightly optimistic. The human diet is flexible because the world demands flexibility. Scholars remain divided on how much climate pressure directly drove ancient human migrations during this period. Some argue that shifting habitats opened and closed routes, pushing groups to move. Others caution that social choices, population patterns, and local knowledge also shaped movement. The truth may be a braided cord of all these things, pulled tight by weather, hunger, curiosity, and memory. The wind changes. You smell rain before you see clouds. It's faint, like stone cooling in shadow. The group notices too. Heads turn. Someone looks toward the west, where clouds gather in a low-grey line. No one panics. Panic wastes warmth, but the pace changes. The roots are wrapped. A few more plants are collected. The child is shifted to the other hip. The group begins moving toward a stand of trees where branches may break the weather. You walk with them. The first drops are light. They darken the dust on stones. They tap on leaves. They bead on hide clothing and run in thin lines. The air grows colder almost immediately. You can feel how weather here is not background. It is a participant. It enters the day and rearranges everything. In modern life, rain often means traffic, wet shoes, or a cancelled picnic. Annoying, yes. Tragic, usually not. Here, rain can mean soaked fuel, chilled children, difficult tracking, softened ground, better plant growth, hidden scents, and new animal movements. Every inconvenience arrives with possible gifts. Every gift carries possible trouble. The world is not generous or cruel. It is simply active. The group reaches the trees, under the branches. The rain becomes a softer pattern. Drops fall from leaf to leaf before reaching the ground. Someone laughs quietly when a child shakes water from their hair like a small animal. Another person checks the wrapped tools. Dryness matters. A good stone edge can survive rain, but bindings, prepared fibres, stored tinder, and softened hide need care. You stand beneath the trees and look outward. The open grassland blurs under falling rain. The distant animals become shadows. The camp smoke behind you thins and bends low. For a moment, the world feels fragile, as if everything human depends on keeping one small fire alive in a damp morning. And perhaps it does. Yet these people are not helpless. They have lived through cold dawns before. They have watched seasons misbehave. They have followed animals across open ground and returned when the wind turned dangerous. They have slept hungry and woken again. They have learned that survival is not one grand victory, but many small recoveries. The rain slows. A pale light spreads through the clouds. The group begins the walk back, carrying roots, wet hides, and the invisible map of another morning added to memory. You follow, feeling the mud cling to each step. Behind you, the cooler world keeps breathing. Ahead, the fire waits. You return to camp with the others as the last drops of rain disappear from the leaves. The fire is still alive, not large, not impressive, just alive. A few glowing coals hide beneath grey ash. Thin threads of smoke drift upward. Someone kneels beside the hearth and carefully adds dry material, preserved beneath layers of hide. A gentle breath follows, then another. The coals brighten. A tiny flame appears. It trembles for a moment, uncertain whether it wishes to become a fire or simply remain a memory of one. Then it catches. The people nearby barely react. No celebration, no applause, no dramatic music swelling from nowhere. Just relief. Quiet, familiar relief. You settle near the warmth and watch the orange light spread across the camp. Water still clings to clothing and branches. Damp earth releases its rich smell into the air. Smoke mixes with the scent of wet grass, animal hide, and the faint aroma of roots being prepared for cooking. And slowly you begin to understand something important. Fire is not merely a tool here, it is almost a companion. Today, turning on heat requires little thought. A button, a switch, a thermostat. Perhaps a brief argument with a machine that somehow believes 21 degrees is reasonable when you clearly requested 23. 60,000 years ago, warmth requires attention. Every day, every season, every generation. A mainstream historical fact is that controlled fire had been used by human ancestors long before this period. Evidence from various archaeological sites suggests that humans were managing and using fire hundreds of thousands of years before the time you're visiting. By 60,000 years ago, fire was deeply woven into daily life. Yet even with long experience, maintaining it remained important. You watch a woman place several roots near the edge of the flames, not directly into the hottest area. Carefully, experience guides the distance. Steam begins to rise. A child reaches too close and is gently redirected. The lesson is immediate and memorable. Fire provides comfort, but it demands respect. That relationship has probably remained unchanged for as long as humans have gathered around flames. The morning continues. Clouds drift apart overhead. Sunlight begins filtering through the trees, touching patches of grass and making droplets sparkle briefly before they disappear. The camp grows busier. Someone repairs a hide covering. Someone sharpens a stone edge. Someone examines tracks left in mud near the river. But throughout all of it, people remain connected to the fire. It is the center of the camp without being its ruler. A place where food changes. A place where cold retreats. A place where stories return at night. You stretch your hands toward the warmth. The sensation is immediate. Cold leaves your fingers first, then your palms, then your wrists. Tiny comforts become enormous when the environment offers few guarantees. Perhaps that is one reason humans grew so attached to fire. It transforms uncertainty into a small circle of control. Outside the flames, darkness exists. Inside the flames, light exists. Outside, cold waits. Inside, warmth waits. Outside, predators move unseen. Inside, eyes can see one another. A lesser-known detail from prehistory is that some researchers believe fire may have played a significant role in extending social time. After sunset, activities that would be difficult in darkness could continue around the flames. Conversation, tool maintenance, teaching, and storytelling all become easier when people can remain awake in a safe, illuminated space. In other words, fire may have changed not only how humans survived, it may have changed how humans thought. You imagine evening thousands of nights ago, a group gathered close together, faces glowing orange, shadows moving across nearby stone, someone describing a successful hunt, someone recalling a distant water source, someone teaching children the names of stars, someone exaggerating a personal achievement by approximately 300%. Human traditions begin somewhere. Bragging probably began very early. You smile quietly at the thought. Nearby, an older man turns a piece of wood in his hands. The stick is blackened at one end. Carefully, He scrapes away damaged material with a stone tool. The process is slow. Nothing is wasted. That lesson appears everywhere in this world. Wood requires effort to collect. Food requires effort to obtain. Tools require effort to create. Knowledge requires effort to preserve. Waste becomes expensive. You look beyond the camp. The landscape stretches toward distant hills. Morning mist is gone now. The air feels clearer. Sunlight reaches farther across the grasslands. Yet despite the brightness, the temperature remains cool. This world lives under different climatic conditions than the one you know. The rhythm of seasons is familiar, but the details are often unfamiliar. Some regions are wetter, others are drier. Some migration routes open, others close. Researchers continue to question exactly how climate fluctuations influence population movements during this period. Some studies suggest that changing environmental conditions created windows of opportunity that allowed human groups to expand into new territories. Other scholars argue that social cooperation and cultural adaptability may have mattered just as much as environmental change itself. Either way, one truth remains visible around you. Adaptation is rarely dramatic. It is usually quiet. A better shelter location, a new food source, a different travel route, a more efficient tool, a memory passed from one generation to the next. Tiny adjustments accumulate. Eventually, those adjustments become survival. The fire crackles softly. A branch settles inward. Sparks drift upward and vanish into daylight. You notice how many people glance toward the flames throughout the day. Not constantly, just enough. A quick check. A brief look. A silent confirmation that warmth remains available. That the camp still has its heart. And perhaps heart is the right word. Not because fire feels human, but because humans repeatedly return to it. You think about all the fires that have existed since this time. Millions upon millions. Campfires, cooking fires, ceremonial fires, village hearths, farmhouse fireplaces, ship lanterns, city furnaces, factory boilers. The glowing coils of modern appliances, different technologies, different centuries, as yet all connected to the same ancient desire to shape energy into comfort. The roots are finally ready. Their smell spreads through the camp. Earthy, warm, slightly sweet. People gather portions and begin eating. No one appears rushed. The food is simple. The meal is small. Yet the mood feels calm. Children chatter. Adults exchange quiet observations. A dog has not yet appeared in every human community at this point. The relationships between humans and canines may already have been developing in some regions. Scholars still debate exactly when and how wolf domestication began. For now, however, the camp belongs mostly to people and fire. You sit near the edge of the gathering and listen. The sounds blend together. Voices, crackling wood, wind through grass, bird calls overhead, water moving in the distance. No single sound dominates. The world feels balanced. Not easy, not safe, not comfortable by modern standards, but balanced. The fire burns steadily. The people continue their work. The day unfolds, and as sunlight climbs higher into the sky, you realize that one of humanity's greatest adaptations was not a weapon, a tool, or a physical trait. It was the ability to gather together around a shared source of warmth and build a small island of security within a vast, uncertain world. The flames dance gently before you. Orange, gold, red, ancient colors. Familiar colors, the same colors that still flicker behind modern glass fireplaces and campsite lanterns. For a moment, 60,000 years does not feel very far away at all. By afternoon, the rain has passed, but the world still feels damp around the edges. Water clings to the grass. Leaves shine in uneven light. The river has risen just enough to sound fuller than before, pressing against stones with a soft, steady rush. You walk back into camp with the mud on your feet, and the smell of wet earth following you like a quiet animal. Now the shelters matter more. They looked simple when you first arrived, almost fragile. as if one careless gust could scatter them across the valley. But after a cold rain, you begin to see them differently. They are not random piles of branches and hide. They are decisions made visible. A shelter here is a conversation with weather. The wind comes most often from one direction, so the low entrance turns away from it. The ground is slightly raised, so water drains rather than pools. Branches bend in a curved frame, not beautiful in a palace way, but graceful in the way of something that has learned to resist without pretending to be stronger than the storm. Hides hang where they block drafts, stones hold edges down, grass and leaves fill gaps. You crouch near one entrance and feel the air change. Outside, the wind moves freely across your face. Inside, the air is stiller, warmer, dimmer. It smells of smoke, hide, dry grass, human bodies, and the faint sour scent of damp material slowly drying. The floor is covered with plant matter and skins. Not luxurious, exactly. No one here is reviewing the bedding with 5 stars and a complaint about the view. But compared with bare wet ground, it is deeply civilized in the oldest sense of the word. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient humans used a variety of shelters depending on region, materials, and season. Caves and rock shelters preserved many traces, but people also lived in open-air camps where structures made of wood, hide, bone, grass, or stone may have disappeared almost completely over time. That is one of the quiet difficulties of understanding this world. Stone survives. Ash may survive. Bone sometimes survives, but branches rot. Hides decay. Grass vanishes. A camp that once held warmth, laughter, smoke, and sleep may leave only a few post holes, stains in soil, scattered tools, and the patient confusion of future archaeologists. You step inside the shelter. The roof is low, encouraging your body to fold inward. You sit near the back where a dry hide has been spread over grasses. The texture beneath your hand is rough, uneven, and slightly warm from the bodies that rested here earlier. A child's small cord lies near one wall, twisted from plant fibre. Beside it rests a broken flake of stone, perhaps discarded, perhaps still useful for some tiny task. Nothing here feels separate from use. Every object waits for a hand. Outside, someone adjusts a covering loosened by rain. Another person pulls damp grass away from one side and replaces it with drier material from a bundle kept under hide. This is maintenance, not construction as a single heroic event. Shelters must be repaired, shifted, tightened, abandoned, rebuilt. In a mobile life, home is not always a place. Sometimes home is a skill carried in the mind. A detail that often surprises people is that temporary shelters can require remarkable planning. You need to know which branches bend without snapping, which grasses insulate, which hides resist water better, where smoke will collect, how many bodies can fit inside, and when the structure is no longer worth repairing. Ancient people did not need modern blueprints. They had repeated experience, which is often a slower and less smug kind of blueprint. You watch 2 adults work together to reset part of a frame. One holds the branch steady, the other binds it with cordage. Their fingers move quickly despite the cold. Twist, loop, pull, tighten. The binding does not look decorative, but it is neat, strong, familiar. A young boy watches from nearby, pretending to help by holding a twig of no obvious importance. This is also part of learning. Sometimes a child's first contribution is symbolic, but everyone has to start somewhere. Even modern adults have meetings like that. The camp is arranged around practical needs. The fire is central, but not too close to the shelter walls. Tool-making happens where light is good and flakes can be swept aside. Food preparation takes place near flat stones. Sleeping spaces cluster where warmth can be shared. Waste and unpleasant smells are kept away from the main living area when possible, because even 60,000 years ago, nobody wanted yesterday's scraps directly beside their face while trying to sleep. Progress begins with basic preferences. The question remains unsettled when it comes to how permanent some camps were in different regions. Some groups may have returned repeatedly to favoured places across seasons. Others may have moved more often, following animals, water, plants, and safety. Evidence allows more than one possibility, and the answer likely change from one landscape to another. You step out again. The sky has softened into late afternoon. Light slides between clouds in pale beams. The camp glows in patches. Wet hides steam faintly near the fire. Children collect small sticks, their hands full of enthusiasm and questionable quality control. An elder sorts the pile with patient authority, keeping useful pieces and setting aside the damp nonsense. The children do not appear offended, or if they do, they recover quickly. A shelter is more than protection from weather. It shapes social life. Inside a small space, people sleep close. They hear one another breathe. They share warmth. They wake if someone stirs in distress. They learn the sounds of family and companions so deeply that silence itself can become information. The shelter teaches nearness. You imagine night returning, wind pressing against the hide walls, rain ticking softly on the roof, a fire glowing outside the entrance, bodies curled beneath skins, someone whispering a story not because it is required, but because darkness invites memory. These structures do not separate humans from nature in the way later houses will try to do. They negotiate with nature. They say, not tonight, wind, not too much, cold. Give us a little room to sleep. And sometimes the wind agrees, sometimes it does not. You run your fingers along a wooden support. The bark has been stripped from places where hands often grip it. Smoothness comes from use. That small polish feels intimate, like a message from everyone who has entered and left before you. What makes this especially interesting is that shelter building reflects more than survival. It reveals planning, cooperation, shared knowledge, and an understanding of comfort. Comfort may sound like a soft modern word, but it is ancient. A dry place to sleep is comfort. A protected child is comfort. A windbreak is comfort. A fire placed where smoke escapes but warmth remains is comfort. The sun lowers. The repaired shelters darken against the grass. Smoke rises again, steadier now. The river continues its quiet work beyond the camp. Birds settle among branches. Somewhere in the distance, an animal calls, long and low, then falls silent. You sit near the entrance of one shelter as evening gathers. The inside waits behind you, dim and warm. The outside stretches before you, wide and uncertain. Between them is the threshold, low enough that anyone entering must bow their head. Perhaps that is fitting. To live here, you bow slightly to weather, to hunger, to cold, to the land itself, and in return, with branches, hides, stones, grass, memory, and patient hands, you make a small room in the vanished world. Not permanent, not perfect, but enough for the night. Night settles once more across the camp. The repaired shelters stand quietly against the darkness, their outlines softened by firelight and shadow. Smoke rises in slow ribbons through the still evening air. Beyond the glow of the hearth, the river continues its endless journey through the valley, carrying reflections of stars that no modern city would allow you to see so clearly. The temperature is already falling. You notice it first on your hands, then your face, then your ears. The warmth of the afternoon disappears surprisingly quickly. Cold moves across the landscape like an invisible tide, filling low places, creeping through grass, settling beneath trees. This is not the kind of chill that invites a cozy blanket and a warm drink before returning to central heating. This is the kind of cold that demands preparation long before it arrives. You pull an animal skin more tightly around your shoulders. Immediately, the difference is noticeable. The wind still exists. The air is still cold, but your body holds its warmth more effectively. Simple, unremarkable, essential. Evidence from archaeological discoveries suggests that prehistoric humans had developed increasingly sophisticated clothing technologies long before the agricultural age. Stone scrapers, awls, bone tools, and hide processing equipment reveal that people invested considerable effort into transforming animal skins into wearable protection against the environment. Clothing, after all, is adaptation made visible. You watch a woman near the fire continue working on a hide. The process looks repetitive at first glance. Scrape! Pull. Stretch. Inspect. Scrape again! But each movement serves a purpose. Raw skin is not immediately comfortable. It must be cleaned, softened, prepared, and maintained. Fat connective tissue and unwanted material need removal. Drying must be controlled. Sometimes smoke helps preserve the material. Sometimes oils or animal brains may be used to soften fibers. The work takes patience. A modern jacket arrives from a store already finished. This garment arrives through knowledge. You sit nearby and observe the details. The hide reflects orange firelight. Tiny cuts and marks show where tools have passed across its surface. The woman occasionally pauses to feel the texture with her fingertips. She's not measuring with rulers or machines. She's measuring through experience. That experience represents countless generations of accumulated learning. The skill didn't appear overnight. Someone learned. Someone taught. Someone improved the process. Someone discovered a mistake the hard way during a cold season. And eventually, knowledge became tradition. A fascinating detail emerges from the archaeological record. Some bone tools discovered at ancient sites appear well suited for piercing hides, suggesting that stitching and fitted clothing may have become increasingly important as humans expanded into cooler environments. Even relatively simple garments could dramatically improve survival. You glance towards several children seated near the edge of the firelight. Their clothing is smaller but constructed using the same principles. Layers overlap, hides wrap around shoulders and legs. Nothing appears particularly fashionable by modern standards, although if you brought a prehistoric person into a modern shopping mall, they might have equally strong opinions about our choices. The important thing is warmth. The important thing is durability. The important thing is surviving another night. The fire crackles softly. Someone adds another branch. Sparks rise upward and disappear among the stars. The camp grows quieter as evening deepens. Several adults continue repairing clothing and equipment. One person twists sinew into cord. Another checks bindings on a spear shaft. A child practices knotting fibre under the watchful eye of an elder. Learning never really stops here. The environment does not permit much forgetfulness. You rub your fingers across the edge of your borrowed hide covering. The texture is uneven. Some areas feel smooth from use. Others remain rougher. Yet despite its imperfections, it performs an extraordinary task. It traps warmth generated by your own body and prevents it from escaping too quickly into the night. That simple principle changed human history. Current evidence points toward clothing as one of the major adaptations that allowed Homo sapiens to occupy increasingly diverse environments. As populations expanded into regions with colder temperatures, protection from wind, rain, and freezing conditions became increasingly valuable. Without clothing, many landscapes remain inaccessible. With clothing, possibilities expand. The stars overhead seem brighter now. The air grows sharper. You hear distant sounds drifting across the darkness. An owl, perhaps another night bird. Something larger moving briefly through grass before fading back into silence. The people around you hear these sounds too. No one appears alarmed. They simply listen. Awareness is part of life. You begin noticing how clothing affects movement as well. A loose covering can catch wind. A poorly secured hide can shift while walking. Wet materials become heavier. Dry materials insulate better. Every design choice reflects practical experience gathered over years. One unexpected feature of prehistoric life is how much effort likely went into maintenance. Modern people often think of technology as machines and electronics, but technology includes anything humans create to solve problems. Clothing qualifies, tools qualify, shelters qualify, even methods for preparing materials qualify, and all technologies require upkeep. The work never entirely ends. Not everyone agrees on exactly when tailored clothing became widespread among human populations. Organic materials rarely survive for tens of thousands of years, making direct evidence frustratingly scarce. Researchers often rely on indirect clues such as tools, environmental conditions, and wear patterns. As a result, several interpretations continue to coexist. Still, the broader picture remains clear. Humans became increasingly skilled at modifying their environment rather than simply enduring it. You watch a man repair a damaged section of hide using a bone tool. His movements are careful, deliberate, almost meditative. The firelight flickers across his hands. Needle, thread, pull, tighten, repeat. The rhythm feels strangely familiar. Across 60,000 years, certain human activities remain recognizable. Sewing, repairing, preparing food, caring for children, gathering near warmth after sunset. The details change. The technology changes. The emotions often remain the same. A cool breeze passes through camp. Several people instinctively pull coverings closer around their bodies. No discussion is necessary. The temperature speaks for itself. You notice something else as well. Clothing provides more than protection. It creates identity, different materials, different construction techniques, different decorative choices. Even in deep prehistory, appearance likely communicated information, family connections, group membership, experience, personal preference. Humans rarely settle for purely functional solutions when given enough time. Creativity tends to sneak into everything. The fire burns lower. The stars wheel slowly overhead. Children begin disappearing into shelters. Adults speak more softly. The camp settles towards sleep. You sit near the fading warmth and think about all the invisible knowledge surrounding you. Knowledge of weather, knowledge of animals, knowledge of plants, knowledge of stone, knowledge of fire, and knowledge of how to transform a skin from a hunted animal into something capable of carrying warmth through a freezing night. These skills are not glamorous. No monuments will celebrate them. No king will carve them into stone. Yet they matter profoundly, because survival is often built from ordinary expertise repeated thousands of times. The wind brushes the valley once more. Your hide covering shifts gently around your shoulders. The warmth remains trapped inside. The cold remains outside. For tonight, that's enough. And in this vanished world, enough can be one of the most valuable achievements imaginable. Morning returns pale and cold. The camp wakes beneath a sky streaked with thin cloud, and the first light spreads slowly over the grassland beyond the river. Smoke from the hearths rises straight for a while, then bends as the wind begins moving across the open ground. You stand near the edge of camp with your hide covering pulled close around you, listening to the soft sounds of people preparing for the day. Today, the group follows animals. Not blindly, not hopefully, carefully. The world beyond the shelters is not empty wilderness. It is a moving pattern of tracks, scents, broken grass, old droppings, distant calls, and remembered routes. Animals shape human movement here almost as much as rivers and weather do. Herds know where water waits. They know where grass grows after rain. They know which valleys hold danger. Humans follow them, study them, and sometimes depend on them with a seriousness that modern grocery shopping does not quite capture. You walk with a small hunting party as they leave the camp. No one speaks loudly. Sound travels strangely in open land, and humans are not the only listeners. The ground is firm in places, soft in others. Mud near the river still holds clear impressions from the night before. You see hoof marks pressed deep beside smaller prints. One person kneels and studies them, touching the edge of a track with 2 fingers. The mark is fresh, not fresh like bread from an oven, which would be extremely welcome but historically unavailable, fresh like a sign written by a passing body. The archaeological record shows that hunter-gatherer groups often relied on detailed knowledge of animal behaviour, seasonal movement, and local landscapes. Large game could provide meat, fat, hides, bone, sinew, and tools, but hunting was never the whole story of survival. It was part of a wider pattern that included gathering, scavenging, fishing, trapping, and sharing. Still, today the animals draw everyone outward. The grassland opens before you in muted colours: pale gold, grey-green, brown earth, dark shrubs bent by wind. Far away, a line of animals moves almost like shadow across the plain. They're too distant to identify clearly at first, but the people around you understand more than you do. Their eyes read the land with trained patience. You notice how slowly they move. Modern stories often make ancient hunting seem like constant running, as if everyone sprinted dramatically across the landscape all day with perfect hair and excellent camera angles. But here, much of the work is waiting, watching, interpreting, choosing not to move too soon. The wind presses against your face. It carries dry grass, cold soil, animal musk, and the faint mineral smell of stone warming in sunlight. A bird lifts suddenly from the ground, flashing pale wings, then drops again beyond a rise. One hunter pauses and looks not at the bird, but at what startled it. Everything may be information. A curious detail emerges from studies of traditional tracking skills in more recent hunter-gatherer societies. Expert trackers can sometimes infer an animal's speed, age, direction, and condition from marks that would look almost meaningless to an untrained observer. While we cannot simply copy modern examples into the distant past, they help us imagine how deep such knowledge could become. You follow the party over a low ridge. Below, the land dips into a shallow basin where water has collected after rain. Around its edges, the mud is crowded with prints, hooves, paws, bird tracks, human footprints from earlier visits. The place smells damp and alive. Insects hover above the surface. The hunters remain still, scanning the edges. The animals are not here now, but they have been. That matters. A man points toward a trail leaving the basin. The gesture is small, almost lazy, but everyone sees it. They move again, following the sign through grass that grows waist-high in patches. Seeds cling to hides. Dry stems brush your legs with a whispering sound. The sun climbs, but warmth remains thin. Some specialists favour the idea that long-distance endurance, cooperation, and planning gave early humans advantages when pursuing animals across open environments. Others remain cautious, noting that hunting strategies likely varied widely by place, season, prey, and available tools. There was no single prehistoric lifestyle. The ancient world was too large and too changeable for one tidy answer. The group stops near scattered stones. Here, 2 people crouch and unwrap tools. Stone points, flakes, and wooden shaft appear from hide bundles. You see care in the way objects are handled. A broken point is not simply trash. It may still cut. A dull edge may be retouched. A shaft may be repaired. In a world where every tool carries labour inside it, throwing things away casually would feel almost strange. One hunter tests a spear point. Another checks bindings made from sinew or plant fibre. Their hands move with focus. The silence is not empty. It is full of preparation. You look across the plain again. The distant herd has shifted direction. The hunters notice, and the group changes course with them, not directly chasing. Not yet. They use the land. A rise hides their movement. A patch of scrub breaks their outline. Wind direction matters. If their scent reaches the animals too soon, the opportunity may vanish. The pace becomes slow enough to feel dreamlike. Step. Pause. Listen. Step again. A grasshopper snaps away from your foot. A cloud covers the sun. Cold returns instantly, reminding you that warmth in this world is always negotiable. Your breath feels dry in your throat. You begin to understand that following animals means following time itself. Their movement tells where the seasons are turning. Their fat tells whether grazing has been good. Their absence tells its own story. If herds fail to arrive, people must change plans. They may move toward another valley, rely more heavily on gathered foods, search river edges, or visit places remembered from older journeys. Adaptation here does not mean one brilliant invention. It means many options held in the mind. At last the group settles behind a low rise. From here, you can see the animals more clearly. Large bodies graze in the distance, heads lowering and lifting. Calves or younger animals stay closer to adults. Birds hop nearby, stealing insects disturbed by hooves. The scene is peaceful, almost beautiful enough to make you forget the hunger behind it. But no one here forgets. The hunters watch. They are not cruel. They are not sentimental either. They live inside a relationship older than farming, older than fences, older than written law. Animals feed humans. Humans study animals. Humans fear some animals. Humans honor some animals. Humans depend on them so completely that the boundary between practical knowledge and reverence may become difficult to draw. You feel the wind shift slightly. One hunter lifts a hand. Everyone freezes. The herd continues grazing. For now the moment holds. No sudden drama follows. No wild charge. No loud shout. Only waiting beneath the open sky. The grass moving in waves. The cold light touching the backs of animals that belong to a world now gone. You breathe slowly. You realize that survival here is not domination. It is attention stretched across distance. It is patience. It is hunger kept quiet. It is knowing when to move and when to remain still. And as you crouch beside the hunters, watching the vanished herds graze across a vanished plain, you sense how deeply human life once followed the footsteps of other creatures. The herd remains behind you as the day slowly unfolds. The hunters continue watching from the rise for a time, but eventually the attention of the camp turns elsewhere. Large animals matter. They always matter. Yet survival in this ancient world depends on more than the dramatic image of a spear and a distant herd moving across open grassland. Much more. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself walking with another group heading toward the river valley. They carry no heavy hunting spears. Instead, they bring digging sticks, woven containers, hide bags, and the quiet confidence of people who know exactly where to look. The morning air has warmed slightly. Dew has vanished from the grass. Insects hum above patches of flowering plants. Small birds dart between shrubs, flashing brief colours before disappearing again. The landscape feels generous today, but generosity can be deceptive. A valley that feeds people in one season may offer very little in another. A familiar patch of plants may fail after drought. A stream may change course. The people moving beside you know this well. Their eyes constantly scan the ground, noticing details that would slip past most modern travellers. You descend toward a patchwork of shrubs and low vegetation near the riverbank. The soil here is darker, richer. The smell changes too. You notice moisture in the earth, the scent of growing roots, crushed leaves, and warm stone baking beneath the sun. Bees drift lazily from flower to flower. Somewhere nearby, water trickles over gravel. A woman kneels beside a cluster of plants and brushes aside loose soil. Within moments she uncovers a thick root, then another, then another. Nothing dramatic. No sudden triumph. Just food appearing from knowledge. The evidence left behind paints a picture of prehistoric diets that were often remarkably diverse. While hunting receives much attention, many human communities relied heavily on gathered resources: roots, nuts, fruits, seeds, shellfish, insects, and countless plant foods contributed valuable calories and nutrients. You watch the work continue: dig, loosen, pull, inspect, store, repeat. The rhythm feels almost peaceful. Children participate too. They search among the plants, occasionally bringing over something useful and occasionally presenting an object of highly questionable value. One child proudly delivers a rock. Not a special rock, just a rock. The adults examine it with admirable seriousness before gently encouraging further exploration elsewhere. Some educational methods appear timeless. The river glitters nearby. Its surface flashes silver beneath the sunlight. Dragonflies skim above the water. Fish occasionally disturb the surface with brief circles that spread outward and vanish. You realize how many small food sources surround the camp. A handful of berries, patch of edible greens, roots hidden beneath the soil, shellfish near a shoreline, bird eggs during the right season, honey if fortune and courage happen to cooperate. Each source alone seems insignificant. Together they create resilience. The deeper truth may be simpler than it first appears. People survive environmental uncertainty by refusing to depend entirely on one thing. If a hunt fails, other foods remain. If plants suffer, fishing may help. If one valley struggles, another may offer opportunity. Flexibility becomes protection. Hidden within this larger story is a detail many people rarely consider. Some gathered foods may have required substantial preparation before becoming edible. Certain plants needed roasting, soaking, grinding, or careful processing to remove bitterness and toxins. Food knowledge often extended far beyond simply recognizing what could be eaten. You stop beside a patch of low shrubs. Tiny berries cling to the branches. Some are collected, others are ignored. At first, the difference is invisible to you. To the gatherers, the distinction is immediate. Knowledge lives inside memory. Memory lives inside community. No written guide exists. No illustrated handbook waits beside the river. The information survives because people teach one another. You imagine how many conversations carried this knowledge forward. A grandmother correcting a child, a parent explaining which leaves to avoid, an elder remembering a difficult year when certain foods became unusually important. Thousands upon thousands of small lessons slowly accumulating. The riverbank widens ahead. Here, several people spread out across a muddy area exposed by changing water levels. They search carefully among stones and shallow pools. Soon, small shellfish begin appearing in containers. Not many at first, then more. The process is slow but productive. The soundscape changes around you. Water moving gently, birds calling overhead, the occasional splash of something unseen beneath the surface. Wind rustling reeds. No machinery, no engines, no distant traffic. Only the sounds of a living landscape carrying on with its day. The archaeological record preserves clues suggesting that aquatic resources became increasingly important for some human populations. Rivers, lakes, estuaries, and coastlines often provided reliable sources of food, particularly during periods when conditions inland became less predictable. Yet exactly how heavily different groups depended upon such resources remains difficult to determine. The picture becomes murkier when researchers attempt to compare regions separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. Human communities adapted to local circumstances in countless different ways. That complexity is part of the story. There was never a single prehistoric lifestyle. There were many. You sit beneath a small tree and watch the work continue. Sunlight filters through the branches above. Warm patches move slowly across the ground as leaves sway in the breeze. The smell of crushed plants drifts through the air. Nearby, someone opens a hide bag already partially filled with roots collected earlier. The contents do not look impressive. A few roots, some berries, several shellfish, a handful of edible greens, yet viewed together, they represent security. The landscape itself offers part of the answer to humanity's success. People adapted because they paid attention to variety. One large animal might feed a group for days, but dozens of smaller resources quietly sustained life year after year. You think about modern supermarkets. Endless shelves, bright packaging, foods from every season available at almost any time. Convenient, certainly. Yet standing beside this ancient river, you realize how disconnected many people have become from the origins of food itself. Here, every meal begins with observation. Every meal begins with movement. Every meal begins with knowledge. Nothing simply appears. The afternoon sunlight softens. Longer shadows begin stretching across the valley floor. The gatherers slowly organize their collections. Containers are checked. Tools are gathered. Children are counted, which remains one of humanity's most important administrative tasks across every century. Everyone begins heading back toward camp. The walk feels unhurried, successful, not because anyone discovered treasure, not because a great hunt occurred, simply because another day has provided enough roots, enough berries, enough shellfish, enough knowledge passed from one generation to the next. The river glows gold beneath the lowering sun. Birds settle among the reeds. The distant camp sends a thin ribbon of smoke into the evening sky. And as you walk toward that familiar fire once again, you begin to appreciate a quiet truth about this vanished world. Human survival was rarely built on a single dramatic moment. More often, it grew from thousands of small discoveries scattered across the landscape, gathered patiently one handful at a time. By the time you return to camp, the gathered food is sorted near the fire. Roots lie in one small pile. Berries rest in a shallow container. Shellfish are placed near heated stones. The evening feels calmer than the morning, warmer too, though the warmth is already fading from the air. Smoke drifts low, carrying the smell of cooked roots and damp wood. Near the edge of camp, away from the sleeping spaces, someone sits with a stone core in one hand and a hammerstone in the other. You hear the first strike, a sharp click, then another, then a thin flake falls into the dust. The sound is small, but it changes the atmosphere around you. It is not random knock-in. It has rhythm, intention, and judgment. The person turns the core slightly, studies the angle, then strikes again. Another flake breaks free, bright along its edge. You step closer. The ground nearby is scattered with chips of stone. Some are useless fragments. Some are sharp enough to cut. Some may become scrapers, blades, points, or smaller tools fitted into handles. What looks like debris is really a record of decisions. The broader pattern in archaeology shows that by 60,000 years ago, humans and related human groups had already developed complex stone tool traditions. Prepared core techniques, blades, scrapers, points, and hafted tools reveal planning beyond a single strike. A tool often began as an idea before it became an object. That idea matters. You watch the maker pause. The stone is not obedient. It has hidden flaws, tiny fractures, stubborn places. Strike too hard and the useful shape shatters. Strike too softly and nothing changes. Strike at the wrong angle and the piece becomes disappointing, which is a feeling older than civilization. The hammerstone rises, falls, clicks. A flake slides away. The maker lifts it carefully and tests the edge with a thumb. Not hard enough to cut, just enough to feel the sharpness. A small nod follows. The flake is placed beside others worth keeping. You realize that tools extend the human body. A sharp flake becomes a better tooth. A scraper becomes a stronger fingernail. A spear point becomes distance between hunger and danger. A bone awl becomes a narrow finger capable of piercing hide. The hand remains human, but the tool gives it new possibilities. Children gather nearby, drawn by the sound. One is allowed to hold a duller piece and imitate the motion under supervision. The result is not impressive. A small chip breaks off in the wrong direction. The child looks deeply betrayed by geology. An adult gives a quiet correction. Again, softer. Angle. Wait, The lesson continues. One overlooked aspect of ancient toolmaking is that it produced both useful objects and enormous amounts of waste material. Archaeologists often find flakes, chips, broken cores, and discarded pieces scattered around work areas. These leftovers can reveal how people learned, where they sat, what methods they used, and sometimes what mistakes they made. Mistakes are precious in the archaeological record. They show process. They show hands thinking. They show that skill was learned through repetition, not gifted by magic to everyone wearing animal skins in a museum painting. You sit beside a flat stone and watch another person retouch a cutting edge. Tiny flakes are pressed away, making the edge more regular. The work requires patience. Firelight flickers over the stone surface, making it gleam. Nearby, the gathered roots from earlier are sliced open with a fresh flake. The cut is clean, smooth, almost startling. A good stone edge can be sharper than many people expect. In fact, some carefully made stone blades can be extraordinarily sharp, although they may be more fragile than metal tools. Sharpness is not a modern invention. Durability, mass production, and convenience are where modern materials become smug. You look around the camp and begin noticing tools everywhere. A scraper near the hide, a point near a wooden shaft, a dig and stick polished from use, a container woven from plant fibre, cordage twisted from sinew or plants, heated stones near food, a bone tool resting beside a sleeping hide. This is not a primitive world in the lazy sense of the word. It is a world of technologies made from materials that decay, break, scatter, and vanish. Stone remains, so stone receives much attention. But much of daily technology may have been made from wood, hide, fibre, bark, bone, antler or shell, and other materials that rarely survive across tens of thousands of years. The surviving clues leave room for disagreement about how quickly particular tool traditions spread, and how much innovation occurred independently in different regions. Similar needs can inspire similar solutions. At the same time, contact between groups may have carried techniques across distance. The evidence does not always make the path clear. You turn a small flake in your palm. It is light. Almost nothing, yet it could cut meat, prepare plants, shape wood, scrape hide, or carve bone. Its value depends on context, on skill, on need. That is true of many things. Even a modern object becomes useless if no one knows how to use it. A phone without power is just a reflective anxiety stone. A tool only becomes meaningful when it enters a human system of knowledge. The maker begins preparing another core. This time the process is slower. They remove flakes from one side to shape the surface. Each removal affects the next. The final tool is not simply found inside the stone, it is negotiated from it. The camp grows darker. People drift closer to the fire with their work. Toolmaking continues, but more quietly now. The sharp clicks blend with voices, crackling wood, and the soft movement of people eating. The smell of cooked shellfish rises briefly, salty and rich, mixing with smoke. A young person brings a broken point to an older maker. The older one studies it, turns it, considers, then begins reshaping the base. Nothing wasted if possible. A broken tool may become a smaller tool. A worn scraper may be sharpened again. A failed flake may teach a successful one. Looking across the firelit camp, you begin to see tools not as objects alone, but as relationships between people and stone, between hand and memory, between today's hunger and yesterday's lesson, between a child watching and an elder demonstrating, between the vanished animal whose hide needs scraping and the sharp edge that makes clothing possible. The night deepens. Beyond the camp, the river sounds steady in darkness. Inside the circle of firelight, hands continue their patient work. Click, scrape, turn, bend, test, again. These sounds are soft enough to sleep beside, yet powerful enough to shape human history. Not loudly, not suddenly, but through repetition. A flake falls, A hide is cut, a shaft is smoothed, a meal is prepared, a child learns, and somewhere in that quiet chain of gestures, the human hand becomes more than a hand. It becomes memory-holding stone. The next morning begins before the sun. You wake to darkness softened by embers and the slow breathing of people inside the shelter. The air is cold enough to make every movement feel deliberate. Outside, something brushes against dry grass, then disappears into silence. You lie still for a moment, listening as the camp stirs around you. Someone rises. A hide is lifted. Cold air slips in at once. You follow the movement outside and find the world painted in grey and blue. The river is barely visible, only a darker line beneath low mist. The ground feels hard beneath your feet. Above the eastern horizon, the first pale light waits without hurry. Today is not a day of making tools or repairing shelters. Today is a day of reading signs. The people around you do not need written maps. They carry maps in memory, in muscle, in stories, and in the practiced eye. The valley, the hills, the river bends, the distant ridge, the taste of certain water, the smell before rain, the season when birds gather in one place rather than another. All of it belongs to a living geography. You walk with a small group away from camp. Their pace is slow at first. No one wants to step carelessly in the half-light. The ground near the river is soft, and soon you begin seeing marks pressed into the mud. Human footprints, bird tracks, the split impressions of hooves, a long drag mark where a branch or tail may have passed. One person kneels beside the tracks and studies them. Not briefly, carefully. You can see how the mud is folded at the edges. One track is crisp, another softened by mist. A few have tiny grains of sand fallen into them. To you, they are marks. To the tracker, they are almost sentences. What we can say with reasonable confidence is that ancient human survival depended on detailed environmental knowledge. Tracks, weather, animal behavior, plant cycles, water sources, and seasonal patterns all mattered. In a world without writing, stored food on a large scale, or permanent roads, memory itself became a technology. You move farther from the river. Grass brushes against your legs. The air smells of cold soil and crushed stems. The sky brightens slowly, revealing low clouds stretched thin above the hills. A bird calls from somewhere ahead. Then another answers from the trees. One of the adults pauses and looks upward. Not at the birds, at the clouds. The group waits. You wait too, though you're not quite sure why. Then you notice it. The wind has shifted since last night. Smoke from the camp now trails in another direction. Clouds are gathering differently along the ridge. The air feels heavier against your skin. Weather is being read, not predicted with numbers, not announced by a cheerful voice beside a little sun icon, but sensed through patterns. The people here may not always be correct. Nobody is always correct, including modern weather apps, which sometimes appear to be guessing with confidence. But their attention is constant. A subtle but revealing observation is that many mobile hunter-gatherer communities, ancient and recent, rely on layered knowledge rather than single signs. One track alone may mislead. One cloud may mean little, but tracks, wind, bird behavior, soil moisture, and memory together create a richer picture. The group climbs a low hill. At the top, the land opens round you. The river curves below like a pale thread. The camp is nearly hidden by trees and smoke. Beyond it stretch grasslands, scattered woodland, and distant darker slopes. The world looks empty only if you do not know how to read it. Someone points toward a faint path through the grass. Animal movement. Repeated. Not a road. Not yet, but a line made by bodies choosing the easiest passage again and again. Humans notice these paths. They use them, avoid them, wait near them, learn from them. You continue along the ridge. The sun rises behind cloud, filling the sky with soft silver light. Shadows remain gentle. Your breath becomes less visible. The cold begins to loosen its grip, though it still sits in your fingers. A younger member of the group finds a print in damp soil and calls softly. An elder comes over. There is no scolding, no hurry. The print is examined. The child offers an interpretation. The elder adds a correction, then points to another mark nearby. A second print, a broken stem, a place where the grass has not yet lifted. The lesson is quiet. The landscape is the page. The child is learning to read. The clues can be read in more than one way when we try to reconstruct such knowledge from ancient evidence. Archaeologists can identify footprints, campsites, kill sites, tools, and environmental remains. But the thoughts behind each decision are harder to recover. We see traces of movement. We do not always know the full intention. You descend from the ridge into a shallow wooded area. The smell changes again. Damp leaves, bark, mushrooms, cool shade. The ground here is softer, muffling footsteps. Branches form a low ceiling. Light enters in narrow bands. Somewhere water drips slowly from leaves, though the rain ended long ago. A person touches the bark of a tree, then looks at the surrounding ground. Another lifts a fallen branch and checks beneath it. Food, insects, small animals, dry materials, signs of larger creatures, useful wood, danger, shelter. All may hide in ordinary places. Nothing is merely scenery. You begin to understand how exhausting it would be to live without this knowledge. Modern people often talk about nature as something peaceful, a weekend escape, a hiking trail, a background for photographs. Here, nature is beautiful. Yes, but it is also information arriving from every direction. The world is always speaking, and not listening can become expensive. The group pauses near an open patch. There, pressed into soft earth, is a set of larger tracks. Everyone grows still. The marks are deep, recent enough to matter. The animal is not visible, but its presence enters the clearing through the evidence it left behind. A weight, a direction, a possible distance, a reason to move carefully. No one panics. They study, they decide. The route changes. This is adaptation at its most graceful. Not fighting the world, not pretending danger does not exist. Simply adjusting before danger becomes immediate. By midday, the clouds have thickened. The group turns back toward camp earlier than expected. Along the way, they collect useful information rather than many objects. A broken branch where animals passed. A patch of plants not yet ready. A place where water has pooled. Signs that the herd from yesterday may shift toward another basin. These details will be shared later. You imagine the evening fire again. Voices low. Hands moving over tools. Someone explaining what was seen. Someone else remembering a similar sign from another season. Knowledge becomes communal not when one person notices, but when the noticing is shared. As camp comes into view, smoke rises through the trees in a thin grey column. The sight feels comforting now. You recognize the shelters, the fire circle, the river bend, the familiar place where tools are shaped. You return carrying almost nothing in your hands. Yet the group has brought back something valuable. A weather warning, a changed route, a remembered track, a better sense of tomorrow. In this vanished world, maps are not drawn on flat surfaces. They live inside people. They are spoken softly, corrected gently, tested by weather, and carried forward one careful step at a time. As evening approaches, the camp gathers itself once again around the fire. The day has scattered people across the valley. Some followed tracks, some searched riverbanks, some repaired shelters, others shaped tools, prepared food, or watched children explore the endless mysteries of sticks, stones, and places they absolutely should not climb. Now those separate threads slowly return to a single centre. The fire glows brighter as darkness settles. Smoke drifts upward through cooling air. Shadows lengthen across the ground. The river beyond the camp becomes difficult to see, though its gentle movement remains audible. Crickets begin their nightly chorus. Somewhere farther away, an animal calls once and then falls silent. You sit near the flames and feel the warmth against your face. The contrast between firelight and darkness feels stronger than it did during your first nights here. Perhaps you have begun to understand what the camp means. Not merely a place, a community, a network of memory, a collection of people who help transform uncertainty into something manageable. Children arrive first. They always seem to. Some settle beside parents, others curl beneath hides near the outer edge of the group. A few continue talking until gentle reminders encourage quieter behaviour. One small child falls asleep while trying very hard not to fall asleep, which remains one of childhood's most universal traditions. The adults gradually gather too. Tools are set aside. Food is shared. Stories begin. Not formal stories at first. Simple observations. Tracks seen near the ridge. Clouds forming beyond the hills. Plants discovered near the river. A place where animals may be moving. Information flows naturally between people. You begin to realize that conversation itself is one of humanity's oldest survival tools. Long before books. Long before writing. Long before maps. There were voices. Knowledge carried from one mind to another. Clues preserved in ancient camps suggest that social cooperation played a central role in human success. Food sharing, collective childcare, coordinated hunting, teaching, and communication appear repeatedly throughout the story of our species. No individual survives this world alone for very long. The landscape is simply too demanding. The seasons too unpredictable. The challenges too varied. The group provides resilience. A successful gatherer helps others. A skilled tracker shares knowledge. An experienced elder remembers past difficulties. A strong hunter contributes food. A careful toolmaker improves efficiency. Each person becomes part of a larger system. You watch an older woman speaking softly to several children. The youngest listens with wide eyes. The older children pretend not to be interested while listening with equal intensity. The story seems familiar to everyone except the youngest listener. Perhaps it describes an unusual animal encounter. Perhaps a difficult winter from years before. Perhaps a lesson disguised as entertainment. Stories often perform several jobs at once. A small detail helps bring the scene to life. Many anthropologists have suggested that storytelling may have served practical purposes beyond simple amusement. Stories can preserve environmental knowledge, social expectations, warnings, history, and group identity in memorable forms. You think about your own world. People still gather around stories. The campfire has changed shape. Sometimes it becomes a television, sometimes a movie screen, sometimes a podcast, sometimes a book, sometimes a video quietly playing in the dark while someone drifts towards sleep. The technology changes. The desire remains remarkably familiar. The fire crackles. Someone adds another branch. Sparks float upward toward the stars. Nearby, a young person practices shaping a small tool while an elder watches. Corrections come gently. Not every lesson requires formal instruction. Much learning happens through observation, a glance, a demonstration, a repeated movement. Knowledge settles into memory slowly, over years, over decades, over generations. The camp grows quieter as darkness deepens. People lean closer to the warmth. The stars appear overhead in astonishing numbers, without city lights. The sky seems almost crowded. Pale bands of distant stars stretch across the darkness. Familiar constellations may exist, though nobody here calls them by the names you know. Yet they notice them. Of course they do. Humans always notice the sky. Buried evidence cannot tell us exactly what people thought while looking upward 60,000 years ago. Beyond the tools, hearths, and shelters, certainty becomes harder to find. But few scholars doubt that the heavens attracted attention. The sky is simply too large, too beautiful, and too persistent to ignore. You follow several gazes upward. The stars seem brighter as the fire settles lower. Children point. Adults occasionally respond. Perhaps names are being shared. Perhaps directions. Perhaps stories. The answer remains hidden in time. Still, the scene feels familiar. Families have looked upward together for countless generations. The same stars, different lives, different languages, different worlds. The firelight dances across faces. An older man's hands move as he speaks. Wrinkles deepen around his eyes. A child laughs quietly. Someone adjusts a hide around sleeping shoulders. Another person passes food to a companion without being asked. These tiny gestures matter. The scene reveals something about human adaptation that tools alone cannot explain. People survive because they cooperated. Not perfectly. Not always peacefully. Humans have never been flawless creatures. But compared with many animals, our ability to share information, coordinate behavior, and maintain social bonds became extraordinary. The camp itself is evidence of that achievement. You listen to the overlapping sounds around you. Soft voices, crackling wood, distant insects, the river moving through darkness, wind brushing grass beyond the shelters. None of it feels rushed. No one appears desperate to fill every moment with activity. The day has been long. The work has been completed. Now there is space for rest, space for memory, space for connection. Gradually, conversation becomes quieter. Children drift into sleep. One by one, adults settle beneath coverings or retreat into shelters. The fire is maintained but allowed to shrink. Large flames become glowing embers. The stars grow even brighter. Cold begins creeping back across the valley. Yet the camp remains warm in its own way. Looking across the circle of fading firelight, you understand something that often hides behind discussions of tools, climate, migration, and survival. Human adaptation was not only technological, it was social. A sharp stone matters, a warm hide matters, a sturdy shelter matters. But so does a grandmother telling a story. So does a hunter sharing information. So does a parent comforting a frightened child. So does a group sitting together beneath the stars. The embers glow softly. Orange, red, gold. The voices fade. The river continues flowing through the darkness. And beneath a sky untouched by modern light, the camp settles into sleep, carrying another day of memory forward into the future. Morning comes gently after the long night of voices and stars. The camp wakes slowly, still wrapped in the memory of the fire. Ash lies pale at the centre of the hearth. Thin smoke curls upward when someone stirs the coals. Children blink in the cold light. Adults stretch stiff shoulders beneath hide coverings. The river keeps moving as if it's been awake all along. You stand near the edge of camp and look beyond the trees. Somewhere out there, other humans move through the same vanished world. Not only people like this group, not only one kind of human story. 60,000 years ago, the world was more crowded with human relatives than it is today. Homo sapiens were not alone. Neanderthals still lived across parts of Western Eurasia. Denisovans, known mostly through genetic evidence and a few precious fossils, were present in Asia. Other human populations may have existed too, leaving traces so faint that they seem almost like whispers beneath the soil. You begin walking with a few members of the camp along a ridge above the river. The light is soft. The grass is silver with dew. Far away, birds rise from the trees in a dark, fluttering cloud. The morning smells of damp earth, smoke, and cold stone. No one speaks much at first. The world feels too quiet for loud voices. A person beside you carries a tool made from stone unlike the material near camp. Its colour is different, its texture smoother. Perhaps it came from far away. Perhaps it passed from hand to hand. Perhaps someone carried it across a landscape you cannot see from here. Objects can travel farther than bodies sometimes. They can hint at meetings, exchanges, movements, and relationships. Ancient DNA has changed the way we understand this period. It shows that Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans did not remain completely separate. At different times and places, these populations interbred, leaving genetic traces that still survive in many people today. That fact makes the world around you feel stranger, and also more intimate. The past is not a simple line. It is a braided stream. You look across the valley and imagine another group beyond the hills. Different voices, different gestures, different tools, different memories, perhaps similar fires, perhaps similar worries over weather and food, perhaps children laughing at jokes no one today could possibly translate. It is tempting to picture encounters between ancient groups as dramatic moments, all fear, conflict, and staring across a ravine like a movie poster. Sometimes encounters may have been tense. Humans are very talented at making things complicated, but other meetings may have involved curiosity, exchange, avoidance, cooperation, or simple passing awareness. The surviving clues do not allow one easy answer. Some specialists emphasize competition between groups. Others point to interbreeding, shared landscapes, and possible cultural exchange. Most likely, different encounters had different meanings depending on place, season, population size, and need. You follow the ridge until the group reaches a scatter of stones near a shallow overhang. Someone kneels and examines the ground. There are old flakes here, weathered and partly buried. Not from yesterday, not from this camp. Perhaps another group used this place before. Perhaps long before. The flakes lie quietly in the dust, small grey fragments catching the morning light. They are not dramatic, but they feel powerful. Someone sat here. Someone struck stone here. Someone watched the same valley from this height and made decisions that vanished almost completely. You touch one flake gently. Its edge is dulled by time. Still, the shape remains. A tiny detail brings this ancient contact into focus. In some regions, archaeologists find different tool traditions overlapping or appearing near one another in ways that raise questions about movement, influence, and shared environments. Stone tools cannot speak, unfortunately, which is inconsiderate after so many thousands of years, but they can suggest patterns of behaviour. The group lingers near the overhang. Wind moves through dry grass. A raven or large dark bird passes overhead, calling once into the open air. The sound fades toward the hills. You imagine Neanderthals in colder lands far from here, broad-bodied, skilled, enduring. They made tools, used fire, hunted large animals, cared for members of their groups, and lived across difficult climates for hundreds of thousands of years. You imagine Denisovans too, harder to picture because so little of their physical world remains clear, yet present in the deep ancestry of later peoples. This is not a world with one human centre. It is a world of many human edges. Some edges meet, some fade, some leave descendants, some leave only bone fragments, stone, and questions. The day warms slowly. Dew dries from the grass. The group begins descending from the overhang toward a narrow stream that feeds the larger river. Along the way, someone points out a broken branch and an animal track, but the mood remains thoughtful, almost watchful. Perhaps this place is known as one where others have passed. Perhaps people return here because it offers shelter. Perhaps the stone flakes are simply old debris, noticed but not deeply mysterious to those living among them. To you, they feel like a message. Not a clear message, more like a handprint left in fog. You reach the stream by midday. Water slips over dark stones. Moss clings to shaded places. The air smells cooler here, greener. People drink carefully and fill containers. One person washes mud from a tool. Another listens for movement in the brush. The possibility of other human groups changes how you understand adaptation. Survival was not only about weather, animals, plants, and tools. It was also about other people, knowing when to approach, when to avoid, when to share, when to move on, when to remember a place as safe, when to remember it as uncertain. Social landscapes can be as important as physical ones. You think of the campfire from last night, the stories, the children, the elders, the warmth. Then you imagine other fires beyond the horizon, separate circles of light under the same stars, different groups shaping stone, drying hides, telling stories, watching weather, raising children. The world grows larger in your mind and more fragile, because not all of these human worlds will last. Neanderthals will eventually disappear as a distinct population. Denisovans will become known mostly through traces left in DNA and rare remains. Homo sapiens will continue, carrying within them pieces of those older meetings, though without remembering the faces, voices, or names. Afternoon light settles across the valley. The group turns back toward camp. No great encounter has happened today. No stranger has stepped from the trees. Only signs, old flakes, distant possibilities, a stone from somewhere else. The quiet knowledge that the human story was never solitary. As you walk back beside the stream, you begin to feel the strange tenderness of it. All those vanished people, all those fires, all those routes across cold plains and wooded valleys, all these lives that touched, separated, blended, or passed one another in silence. The camp smoke appears ahead. Familiar now, soft against the sky. You return to the fire, carrying no proof that can answer every question. Only the feeling that this world once held many kinds of human presence. And under the evening light, that is enough to make the valley feel full. The next few days bring a subtle change to the rhythm of camp. Nothing dramatic happens. No storm sweeps across the valley. No great herd arrives. No sudden danger appears from the darkness. Instead, people begin talking more often about distance, about routes, about places beyond the hills. You notice it first while sitting near the morning fire. Two adults speak quietly while examining a stretch of animal hide. One gestures toward the south, another points west. The conversation continues for a long time, interrupted by pauses, memories, and thoughtful silence. The valley has been generous recently. Food has been available, water remains reliable, shelter is secure, yet the people here understand something that modern life often allows us to forget. Conditions change, and when conditions change, movement becomes survival. Several mornings later, you find yourself walking with a small group away from camp once again. The sky's clear. The air carries the smell of dry grass and distant stone warmed by sunlight. Small clouds drift lazily above the hills. Birds move between patches of woodland. At first the landscape feels familiar, then gradually it changes. The river falls behind, trees become less common, the ground grows harder, the wind becomes more noticeable. You are entering a transitional space. Neither valley nor forest, neither home nor destination, just movement. One thing experts feel reasonably confident about is that mobility played a major role in prehistoric human life. Depending on environment and season, many groups moved regularly in search of food, water, shelter, social connections, and opportunity. Movement was not always a sign of crisis. Often it was simply part of life. You climb a rocky slope. Loose stones shift beneath your feet. Dry plants cling stubbornly to cracks in the ground. The sun feels stronger here, reflecting from pale surfaces. Sweat appears despite the cool air. Ahead, the group pauses at a high point overlooking unfamiliar land. The view stretches for miles. Grasslands, dry channels, scattered trees, low ridges fading into blue distance. The world feels immense, and surprisingly empty. Yet you know better now. Empty landscapes are usually full of stories waiting to be noticed. One person kneels beside a cluster of stones arranged in an unusual pattern. Not naturally, deliberately. The arrangement is simple enough that you might have ignored it entirely. The others do not. They study it, touch it, think about it. Perhaps it marks a route, perhaps a stopping place, perhaps a remembered location. No explanation is spoken aloud. Everyone seems to understand. A fascinating hint from archaeology is that repeated movement across landscapes often leaves subtle traces, pathways, favoured campsites, resource locations, and gathering places can become part of cultural memory long before permanent settlements appear. You continue onward. The afternoon grows warmer. The ground beneath your feet changes again. Dust replaces grass. The smell of moisture disappears. Wind carries fine particles that settle against your skin. This place feels harsher, more exposed. The group slows. People scan the horizon carefully. Water becomes a more important thought here. Shade becomes more valuable. Knowledge becomes more precious. The deeper lesson begins to reveal itself. Humans did not adapt to difficult environments because they were physically stronger than every challenge. They adapted because they carried information. A person who knows where water exists is stronger than a person who does not. A group that remembers safe routes is stronger than a group that wanders blindly. Memory transforms landscapes. The land itself remains unchanged, but knowledge changes how people move through it. You stop beneath a rocky outcrop. The shade feels wonderful. Cool air lingers beneath the stone. Small insects move among cracks. Someone removes a water container and drinks carefully. Not greedily, carefully. Every resource matters. The conversation around you becomes quieter. Travel encourages observation. You notice how often people look toward the horizon, how frequently they check landmarks, how naturally they compare what they see with what they remember. There are no maps folded inside hide bags, no compasses, no signs pointing toward useful destinations. The landscape itself provides direction. Meanwhile, the sun continues its slow journey overhead. The shadows shift. The wind changes slightly. A distant bird circles above an unseen source of food. Every detail contributes something. Not all experts agree on how extensive prehistoric travel network became in different regions. Some evidence suggests surprisingly long-distance movement of materials such as stone, shell, pigments, and other resources. Other cases appear more localized. The scale likely varied enormously from one population to another. Still, objects sometimes traveled remarkable distances, and where objects travel, information often follows. You think about the unusual stone tool seen days earlier, the one made from material not found near camp. Perhaps someone carried it. Perhaps it was exchanged. Perhaps it passed through several groups before arriving here. The possibility makes the landscape feel connected in ways that are difficult to see. The afternoon passes quietly. The group reaches a dry channel carved by water long ago. At present it holds only scattered stones and patches of vegetation. Yet people study it carefully. Water may return here. Animals may use it. Plants may grow differently nearby. Even absence contains information. You follow the channel for a time. The silence feels different from the valley silence. There are fewer birds, less flowing water, more wind. The sound of your own footsteps becomes noticeable. The environment feels older somehow, stripped down, simple. Yet survival remains possible because people understand how to read it. Looking across the open land, you begin to realize that adaptation often happens long before a challenge arrives. The traveler prepares before thirst becomes severe. The hunter studies routes before prey appears. The gatherer remembers useful locations before food becomes scarce. Preparation is invisible when it works well. That may be why it receives less attention than dramatic survival stories. Yet it is often more important. The group eventually turns back toward familiar territory. The journey was not about reaching a destination. It was about maintaining knowledge, confirming routes, checking conditions, refreshing memory. The sun begins sinking lower behind the hills. Golden light spreads across the landscape. Dust glows softly. Long shadows stretch across stone and grass. The valley appears again in the distance. Smoke rises faintly from camp. The sight brings unexpected comfort. Home in this world is rarely permanent. The shelters may disappear. The camp may move. The valley itself may one day be abandoned. Yet for now it remains familiar. You descend toward it with the others. The day's travel has not filled your hands with resources. Instead, it has filled your mind. Routes, landmarks, water sources, possibilities, warnings, knowledge. And as evening settles across the ancient landscape, you understand why humans crossed enormous distances over countless generations, not because wandering itself was the goal, but because movement allowed them to remain connected to opportunity in a world that never stood still. The next morning carries the smell of water farther than usual. Not river water this time. Something wider, sharper, saltier. You notice it before anyone explains. The air tastes faintly different on your lips, and the wind has a clean edge that does not belong to the inland valley. The group has been moving for hours through low scrub and open ground, following a route remembered by adults and half understood by children, until the land begins to slope downward. Then, beyond a line of pale grass and dark rock, the world opens. The sea appears. It is not the sea exactly as you know it. 60,000 years ago, sea levels were lower than today because so much water was locked in ice. Coastlines often lay far beyond their modern positions, meaning many ancient shore camps now rest beneath waves. The beach ahead of you may one day disappear under deep water, taking its footprints, hearths, and shell piles with it. For now, it glows beneath morning light. Grey-blue water stretches toward the horizon. Waves fold slowly over wet sand. Birds wheel above the shore, crying into the wind. The smell of salt, seaweed, damp shells, and drying kelp fills the air. After days among river grass and stone hills, the coast feels like another world. The people around you do not stare in wonder the way you do. They know this place, or at least some of them do. A child runs toward the sand and is called back before reaching the water. The correction is gentle but immediate. The sea gives food, but it also takes things. It has moods. It has timing. It has hidden places where footing fails. You walk down onto the shore. The sand is cool and packed beneath your feet. Shell fragments crunch softly. Tiny creatures vanish into holes as shadows pass over them. Waves slide up the beach, thin and bright, then withdraw with a soft hiss. Near the rocks, several adults begin searching tidal pools. They move slowly, bending low, lifting stones, checking crevices. Soon they find shellfish clinging to rock, small crabs hiding under ledges, edible sea plants tangled in pools. The work looks almost peaceful, but it requires knowledge. Some things are useful, some are not. Some can be gathered only at the right time. Some places become dangerous when the tide returns. The smallest clues sometimes survive the longest. At later archaeological sites around the world, shells, fish bones, burned stones, and coastal tools show how important shorelines became for many human groups. The sea offered protein, fat, minerals, containers, ornaments, and routes along the edge of continents. You kneel beside a pool. Its surface reflects the sky. Beneath it, tiny lives move among green weed and dark stone. A hand enters the water carefully and lifts a shellfish free. Another person uses a stone tool to pry at the rock. The shell gives way with a wet pop. A child laughs softly. Someone passes the shell into a container. Nothing here feels abundant in the modern supermarket sense. The coast does not arrange food in bright rows and politely accept payment. It hides food in pools, mud, reefs, sand, and timing. The people here must understand low tide, high tide, bird behavior, currents, seasons, and the sharp edges of shells that do not care about human skin. You hear gull-like birds calling overhead. Farther along the shore, two people walk near driftwood. They examine long pieces washed in by the sea. Some wood may be useful, some is too rotten, some bends nicely, some breaks badly. Even here, where the horizon looks endless, survival depends on small selections. You look out across the water. The waves move steadily, one after another. Beyond them lies distance, perhaps islands, perhaps another coast, perhaps nothing reachable from here. It is difficult to know what people of this time attempted in different regions, because the sea has hidden so much evidence beneath later rising waters. Exactly how early humans used boats or rafts remains one of those questions where certainty thins out. We know humans reached Australia by at least around 50,000 to 65,000 years ago, which implies some kind of water crossing, but the materials used for early watercraft would rarely survive. Wood, reeds, bark, fibre, all are wonderful for floating and terrible for impressing archaeologists 60,000 years later. The group moves along the shore as the tide lowers. More rocks appear. More pools open. The sound of the sea becomes a slow breathing beside you. In, out. In, out. It is easy to imagine coastal travel becoming attractive in this world. A shoreline can act like a guide. Walk with water on one side and land on the other, and the route explains itself more clearly than an open desert or dense forest. Food may appear along the way. Fresh water can sometimes be found in streams reaching the sea. Birds signal productive places. Shells and fish leave traces. But the coast is also unstable. Storms reshape beaches. Tides cut off paths. Fresh water may vanish. And over thousands of years, the shore itself moves. The ground beneath your feet is temporary, though it feels solid now. A woman cracks open shellfish with a stone and places the meat near heated rocks. The smell is briny and rich. Smoke from a small fire mixes with salt wind. Children gather dry seaweed and bits of driftwood, presenting both with serious expressions. Some pieces are accepted, others are quietly rejected, continuing the ancient struggle between child enthusiasm and adult standards. The meal is small but welcome. People sit among rocks, eating while watching the water. The mood is calm, the sea brightens under afternoon light. Clouds drift slowly above the horizon. Waves leave shining lines across the sand. You notice shells with small natural holes. One young person collects a few and strings them on fibre. Perhaps they are decoration, perhaps play, perhaps something with meaning, perhaps all three. Humans rarely separate usefulness and beauty as neatly as later museum labels do. Seen from the future, such small objects matter. Shell ornaments found far from coasts can suggest travel, exchange, identity, or memory. A shell is light, but it can carry distance inside it. By late afternoon, the tide begins to change. Adults notice before you do. The pools fill differently. The waterline creeps upward. The group gathers tools, food, and children, which again proves to be an important administrative tradition. No one rushes, but no one ignores the sea either. You climb back from the shore toward higher ground. The wind pushes at your back, salt dries on your skin. Behind you, waves cover the sand where you walked earlier. Footprints blur, shell fragments roll. The beach begins erasing the day. That is the sea's way. It gives, it hides. It remembers in fragments. At the top of the slope you turn for one last look. The horizon is wide and pale. Birds move like dark marks against the sky. The shore below glimmers in evening light, already changing, already becoming something else. You understand now why the sea could be a road. Not a road of stone, not a road with signs. A moving road, a dangerous road. A road that fed people, guided them, separated them, and sometimes carried them toward worlds they had never seen. The sea remains behind you now. Its scent lingers faintly on clothing and hair as the group gradually returns inland. Salt gives way to grass. Grass gives way to woodland. Woodland opens once more into familiar stretches of valley and river. The journey feels slower on the return, perhaps because everyone carries more than food. They carry impressions, memories, new observations, a shell collected from the shore, a story that will be told beside the fire. The evening arrives cool and clear. Smoke rises from the camp in a thin grey column. The familiar shelters stand against the fading light. Children race ahead toward the warmth, while adults follow more slowly. The river reflects the first stars of the night. For a while, the camp settles into ordinary tasks. Food is prepared. Tools are checked. Water is collected. The fire is fed. Then something changes. Not dramatically. Not all at once. You simply notice several people gathering near a section of rock beyond the camp. Curiosity pulls you closer. The stone surface is sheltered beneath an overhang. It protects against rain and wind. Firelight flickers across its uneven face, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow. Someone lifts a small piece of coloured earth. Another mixes dark charcoal with a little moisture. The preparations feel familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. A toolmaker shaping stone makes sense. A gatherer sorting roots makes sense. But this belongs to something else. The person approaches the rock wall. A hand moves. A mark appears. Simple, deliberate. The camp grows quieter. Not silent, just attentive. The mark remains on the stone after the hand withdraws. Then another appears. And another. You're witnessing one of humanity's strangest adaptations. The ability to place thoughts outside the mind. Many generations later, traces of paintings, engravings, pigments, and symbolic markings would be found in caves, shelters, and open-air sites across different parts of the world. These discoveries suggest that symbolic expression had become an important part of human life long before cities, writing systems, or organized states emerged. The firelight dances across the stone. The newly added marks seem almost alive. Red, black, brown, soft shapes emerging from rough rock. You cannot know exactly what they mean. Perhaps they represent animals, perhaps memories, perhaps stories, perhaps identities, perhaps things impossible to translate into modern language. That uncertainty becomes part of their power. You sit nearby and watch. No one appears rushed. The artist pauses frequently, looking, thinking, adding another line. Then another. A child edges closer. An adult gently guides them to a better viewing place. The scene feels familiar in a way that surprises you. Not because the images themselves are familiar, because the act is. Humans still gather around creative work, still watch, still discuss, still wonder what another person is trying to express. A small clue hidden within ancient pigments tells us something remarkable. In some regions, people travelled considerable distances to obtain particular minerals used for colouring. Certain red ochres, black pigments, and other materials appear to have been valued far beyond their immediate practical uses. Colour mattered, meaning mattered, beauty mattered. You look around the gathering. Faces glow in the firelight. Children lean against adults. Someone continues shaping a tool nearby. Another person repairs a hide. Life does not stop for art. Art becomes part of life. That distinction feels important. Modern museums often place creativity in separate buildings under careful lighting and strict rules about touching things. Here, creativity sits beside cooking fires. It shares space with sleeping places. It exists among daily tasks. The artist steps back. Others study the work. No formal announcement follows. No grand unveiling. Only observation. Recognition. Perhaps discussion. The rock face now carries something that did not exist before. An idea made visible. The night deepens. Stars multiply overhead. The painted surface catches light differently now. Shadows slide across the images as flames move. For a moment, the figures seem to shift. An animal appears ready to walk. A lane seems ready to move. The effect feels strangely powerful. Looking closer, another layer of the story emerges. Art may have done more than decorate. It may have helped preserve memory. A successful hunt remembered. A place remembered. A lesson remembered. A group identity remembered. Or perhaps something more emotional than practical. Wonder, grief, hope, curiosity. Not every human activity needs a direct survival purpose. That truth becomes increasingly clear as you watch the fire. Some questions remain difficult to answer. We can identify pigments, engravings, and images. We can estimate ages. We can compare styles. Yet the thoughts inside the artist's mind remain mostly hidden from us. Time preserved the marks, but not every explanation that once accompanied them. In some ways, that mystery makes the art more moving. The person who created it is gone. Their language is gone. Their voice is gone. Their name is gone. Yet a gesture remains. A hand moved across stone. And thousands of years later, another human being can still stand before the result. The fire crackles softly. A breeze passes through camp. The smell of smoke mixes with pigment, hide, earth, and cooling air. Someone adds more wood to the flames. Light brightens briefly. The images on the rock become clearer. You notice that children continue watching closely. They are learning something, though perhaps not a specific lesson. They are learning that humans leave traces, that ideas can be shared, that memories can survive outside the mind. The night continues unfolding around you. Conversation drifts between groups. A few people laugh quietly. Others sit in thoughtful silence. The painted wall remains nearby, catching occasional glances, not demanding attention, simply existing. The stars wheel slowly above the valley. The river murmurs in the darkness. The shelters stand warm and familiar, and beneath the rock overhang the images remain. They may survive weeks, years, generations, perhaps far longer, long after the camp moves on, long after the fire cools, long after the footprints vanish from the soil. You find yourself staring at the marks one final time before sleep. Simple shapes, simple colours, simple gestures, yet together they represent something extraordinary. Not a sharper tool, not a stronger shelter, not a better hunting strategy. Something less tangible, the desire to leave meaning behind, the desire to communicate across time, the desire to transform memory into something visible. The artist returns to the fire. The rock remains. The night grows deeper. And somewhere between flame, stone, imagination, and memory, humanity begins telling stories that can outlive the storyteller. The painted images remain in your thoughts long after the fire burns low. When morning arrives, the camp feels quieter somehow. The rock overhang still stands beyond the shelters. The marks remain where they were left. Sunlight reaches them now instead of firelight, revealing details hidden by darkness. The colours appear softer in daylight, but no less meaningful. You pass by them as the day begins. Several children stop briefly to look. One traces a shape in the air without touching the stone. Then the moment passes. Work resumes. Life continues. Yet something subtle has changed. The camp feels more connected than before. Not because of food, not because of shelter, because people have shared an experience. The morning unfolds beneath clear skies. A gentle breeze moves through the valley. The river sparkles in long silver bands. Birds call from nearby trees. The smell of smoke drifts across camp as breakfast is prepared. You notice a group gathering near the fire after the meal. No tools are being shaped. No hides are being worked. Instead, someone begins making a rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. A stick against wood, slow at first, then steadier. Another person joins by striking two pieces of wood together. Click, click, click. Before long, a pattern emerges. Simple, repeated, pleasant. The sound spreads through the camp like ripples across water. You sit nearby and listen. Children sway slightly. Adults smile. Someone hums quietly beneath the rhythm. The sound is not music in the modern sense of orchestras, headphones, or playlists generated by mysterious algorithms that somehow know you want sad songs during rainstorms. It is something older, more immediate, a shared pulse. Many ancient sites contain objects that may have produced sound, including flutes made from bone, percussion tools, rattles, and other items whose purposes remain debated. While the exact forms varied, few researchers doubt that rhythm and sound played important roles in human social life long before written history. The tapping continues. The pattern grows more complex. Not complicated, just richer. You begin noticing how naturally people respond. Some clap softly. Others add their voices. A child invents an enthusiastic contribution that bears only a passing relationship to the established rhythm. The effort is appreciated anyway. The scene feels joyful without becoming loud. The rhythm binds attention together. No instructions are necessary. No one explains the purpose. Participation happens naturally. You watch an elder sitting near the edge of the gathering. The rhythm seems familiar to them. Their hands move slightly in time. Their eyes remain half closed. Perhaps they remember hearing similar sounds many years ago beside another fire. Perhaps someone taught them. Perhaps they once taught someone else. The pattern continues. A deeper idea begins taking shape in your mind. Rhythm creates coordination, not only in movement, in feeling. A group sharing the same beat shares attention for a moment. Breathing aligns, focus aligns, memory aligns. This may help explain why music appears in so many human cultures across so many different environments. The landscape offers food and shelter. Rhythm offers connection. A tiny clue preserved in ancient bone tells part of this story. Some prehistoric flutes discovered by archaeologists required careful craftsmanship. Their makers selected suitable materials, shaped openings, and understood how air could become sound. Such objects suggest that people invested time and skill in creating experiences that extended beyond immediate survival. The valley grows warmer as the day advances. The music fades eventually. People return to ordinary tasks. Yet the feeling lingers. You walk beside the river while voices drift behind you. Water flows over stones. Dragonflies skim the surface. The current produces its own rhythm. Soft, continuous, predictable. Perhaps that is another reason humans respond to rhythm so strongly. The natural world contains it everywhere. Waves reaching shore, footsteps during travel, rain striking leaves, heartbeats, breathing, seasons, day and night. Patterns surround life. Music simply gathers some of those patterns and brings them closer together. Near the riverbank, two children play a game involving stones. The rules remain unclear. The enthusiasm does not. Laughter rises and falls. One child wins. Another immediately challenges the result. Some human traditions require no archaeological confirmation. You sit beneath a tree and watch the river. Clouds drift overhead. Their reflections break apart in the moving water. The day feels peaceful, not because nothing is happening, because life is functioning as intended. Food has been gathered. Water remains available. Shelter stands secure. The group feels connected. For now, those conditions are enough. Exactly how ancient music sounded remains beyond our reach. Instruments survive occasionally. Rhythms do not. Voices do not. Melodies vanish more easily than stone tools. We can identify possibilities, but many details disappeared into the air the moment they were performed. There is something beautiful about that. Not everything important leaves permanent traces. A song can matter deeply even if no record survives. An evening of laughter can shape memory without entering history books. A shared rhythm can strengthen a community without leaving anything behind except stronger relationships. The afternoon drifts onward. The camp settles into its usual pace. People work, children explore, the river flows, wind moves through grass, yet every now and then, someone taps a rhythm absent-mindedly against wood or stone. The sound returns briefly, then disappears again, like a memory resurfacing. As evening approaches, the fire is rebuilt. Orange light begins pushing back the shadows. People gather once more. The painted images wait nearby beneath the rock overhang. The familiar shelters stand against the fading sky. The valley feels almost timeless. You take a place beside the fire. The first stars appear. Someone begins tapping a slow pattern against a piece of wood. Not a performance, just a sound. Another person joins, then another. The rhythm spreads gently through the gathering. No one announces its importance. No one needs to. The lesson hidden inside the moment is simple. Humans adapted to difficult worlds not only through tools, shelters, and knowledge. They adapted through connection, through shared stories, shared memories, shared symbols, and sometimes through nothing more complicated than sitting together beside a fire, while a familiar rhythm moves quietly through the darkness. The stars brighten overhead. The river continues its endless song. The camp settles into evening once again, and for a little while, Beneath the vast sky of a vanished world, every heartbeat seems to belong to the same gentle rhythm. The rhythm from the night before seems to remain in the camp even after morning arrives. No one is tapping wood now. No one is humming beside the fire. Yet the memory of shared sound lingers in the way people move together, passing tools, gathering water, checking the shelters, glancing toward the sky as clouds drift over the valley. You begin to notice something that is harder to see than stone or fire. The mind itself is adapting, not in one sudden leap, not in a single and magical moment when someone wakes up and invents humanity before breakfast, which would be impressive but suspiciously convenient. Instead, adaptation unfolds in small acts of planning. A woman sets aside dry grass for later fire making. A young hunter studies an old spear point and imagines how it might be improved. A child watches footprints near the river and remembers which ones belonged to birds yesterday. An elder describes a distant place beyond the hills where water remains even when the lower streams shrink. Each action reaches beyond the present moment. That is the quiet miracle. People here do not only react, they anticipate. You walk with several others toward a line of trees where useful branches grow. The morning is cool, but soft. Mist lifts from the river in pale strips. Sunlight slips between trunks and lands in warm patches on the ground. Underfoot, leaves give a faint dry crunch. One person selects a branch and bends it slightly. Too brittle. Another branch is tested. Better. The choice is not only about what the branch is now, but what it could become: a handle, a digging stick, a support for a shelter, a child's practice spear. If everyone is feeling patient and nobody values their toes too much, human thought works this way constantly. It sees the present and imagines a future shape. Long after this morning vanishes, scattered objects from ancient camps will hint at that kind of planning. Prepared stone cores, carefully shaped tools, pigments carried from distant sources, ornaments, shelters, hearths reused over time, all suggest minds able to remember, compare, imagine, and prepare. The group returns with several branches. Near the fire, one is stripped of bark using a sharp flake. The movement is smooth and practiced. Curling strips fall away. Pale wood appears beneath the darker surface. The branch slowly becomes something else. You sit nearby and watch the transformation. A tool is never only material. It is an idea given shape. The same is true of a route across dry country. A story told to children, a mark painted on stone, or a rhythm shared after sunset. Each one allows people to carry meaning beyond the immediate moment. That ability changes everything. Animals plan in their own ways. Many creatures remember, communicate, solve problems, and cooperate. Humans are not separate from nature like some grand exception wearing a dramatic cape. But human imagination became unusually powerful because it could combine memory, language, tools, and social learning into something flexible. You see that flexibility all around you. A shelter becomes home for a few nights. A coastline becomes a road. A painted wall becomes memory. A sound becomes shared feeling. A stone flake becomes a cutting edge. A child's mistake becomes a lesson. The camp is full of invisible architecture. Plans, rules, relationships, expectations, warnings, stories. None of these can be picked up like a tool, yet the camp would collapse without them. By midday, the clouds thicken and the air grows still. People notice. They always notice. Tasks are adjusted before rain arrives. Dry materials are moved under cover. Food is brought closer to the fire. A hide is stretched differently over one shelter to guide water away from the sleeping area. The future is not guaranteed, but it is considered. That is enough. You help carry a bundle of grass toward a shelter entrance. It smells sweet and dry against your arms. Inside, the air is warmer, heavy with the scent of hide and smoke. Someone places the grass where dampness had gathered after the last rain. A small correction, small comfort. A small act of foresight. Modern life often hides planning inside systems. Calendars remind us. Roads guide us. Weather forecasts warn us. Refrigerators preserve food. Alarms wake us. Search engines answer questions before we have fully earned the right to be curious. Here, the system is the group. Memory replaces written instruction. Attention replaces automation. Cooperation replaces infrastructure. It is not simple. It is sophisticated in a different way. The afternoon rain arrives softly. Drops patter on hides and leaves. The river darkens. Smoke bends beneath the low air before lifting again. People gather near the central fire, not because the day is finished, but because the rain has temporarily rearranged the work. Someone begins telling a story. You do not understand the words fully, but you understand the shape. There is a place, a journey, a mistake, a warning, laughter at the expense of someone who probably deserved it, a moment of danger softened by time, a practical lesson hidden inside entertainment. This is how knowledge travels without feeling like instruction. A child remembers a story more easily than a list. Adults do too, though adults like to pretend otherwise. Stories turn information into something the mind can hold. The rain continues. The storyteller gestures with one hand, shaping the air. Faces in the shelter glow faintly from the fire outside. Children lean closer. An older person adds a correction, and the group reacts with gentle amusement. Apparently, even in deep prehistory, someone could not resist fact-checking the storyteller. Some parts of ancient language and thought will never be recovered. Words vanish unless they are written, and no writing exists here. Yet everything around you suggests that communication must be rich, flexible, and deeply social. Coordinated hunting, teaching, planning, tool-making, childcare, travel, and shared memory all require more than simple signals. The exact sounds are gone. The need behind them remains clear. Evening approaches while the rain fades. Mist rises from the ground. The shelters drip slowly. The air smells fresh, smoky, and green. People emerge from cover and resume small tasks under a clearing sky. You step toward the painted rock face. The marks remain. Rain has not reached them under the overhang. They wait in dim light, quiet and patient. You think about the mind that made them, a mind that could see an animal, remember it, imagine it, and place something of it on stone. A mind that could transform experience into symbol. This may be one of the greatest adaptations of all. Not simply surviving the world as it appears, but creating inner worlds that help people navigate the outer one. Maps in memory, stories in language, plans in gestures, meanings in marks, rhythms in the dark. The sky clears near sunset. A pale gold light spreads across the valley. Droplets on grass shine briefly like tiny stars fallen to earth. The river carries the last rainwater away. You stand beside the fire as people settle into evening. Nothing grand has happened today, and yet everything important has been present. Planning, teaching, remembering, imagining, sharing. The human body adapts to cold with clothing, to hunger with tools, to weather with shelter. But the human mind adapts by making connections. Between yesterday and tomorrow, between one person and another, between what is seen and what might be, and as night returns softly over the vanished valley, you begin to understand that the world no longer exists, but the habits of mind born within it still live quietly inside us. The morning after the rain feels unusually bright. The sky's clear from horizon to horizon. Sunlight pours across the valley and settles on the wet grass left behind by the storm. Tiny droplets sparkle everywhere. The river moves quietly through bands of mist that are already beginning to disappear. You wake to the sound of children, not crying, not arguing, at least not yet, simply talking. The camp feels lighter today. Several adults are already working near the fire, but your attention drifts toward the younger members of the group. They move through the camp with the endless energy that seems to belong exclusively to children in every century. A small boy follows an older hunter carrying sticks. A girl crouches near the riverbank examining tracks. 2 others are attempting to build a miniature shelter beside a larger one. The structure is not particularly successful. It leans dramatically to one side. Its future appears uncertain. Yet the builders are deeply proud of it. You smile and continue watching. The future of this world sits all around you. Not in tools, not in shelters, not even in stories, in children. Every skill you have seen over the past weeks must pass through them if it is to survive. The way to prepare a hide, the safest crossing place in the river, the shape of a useful stone core, the smell of approaching rain, the plants that nourish, the plants that harm, the stars that help guide a journey. Nothing lasts unless someone learns it. The camp understands this instinctively. No formal school stands near the river. No classroom waits beneath the trees. Yet learning happens constantly. You walk toward the children building their shelter. One child places a branch carefully. Another immediately moves it somewhere else. A brief disagreement follows. The discussion appears serious. Eventually a compromise is reached. The shelter remains questionable but functional. Nearby, an adult watches without interfering. That feels important. The children are being allowed to experiment. Mistakes are not always prevented. Sometimes they are part of the lesson. Looking across the camp, you begin to notice how much learning happens through observation. A young boy studies the motions of a toolmaker. A girl watches an elder preparing food. Another child follows adults collecting firewood. Nobody announces that education is occurring. It simply unfolds within daily life. Many generations later, traces of this process would remain difficult to see directly. Archaeologists can uncover tools sized for smaller hands, footprints left beside adult tracks, and evidence of learning preserved in imperfect workmanship. Such clues hint at childhood without fully revealing it. Imagine a future archaeologist discovering a poorly made stone tool and wondering why it looks so awkward. Perhaps the answer would be simple. A child made it. The thought makes you unexpectedly happy. Near the river, several children gather around an older woman. She points toward the muddy bank. You move closer. Tracks. Fresh ones. The lesson begins. She doesn't lecture. She simply asks questions. The children answer, sometimes correctly, sometimes not. One child confidently identifies a bird track as something much larger and considerably more dangerous. The others laugh. The elder smiles. Then she demonstrates the difference. The track becomes a story. The story becomes memory. Memory becomes knowledge. The morning passes gently. Sunlight grows warmer. Birdsong fills the trees. The smell of smoke drifts across camp. Children move constantly between play and learning without noticing any distinction. One moment they chase one another around the shelters. The next moment they are helping gather useful plants. Then they are inventing games. Then observing adults. Then asking questions. Then running again. Energy arrives in waves. A little farther from camp, a group of older children practices throwing small sticks at a target marked on a tree. Some throws are accurate, most are not. The tree remains impressively patient throughout the exercise. You watch one young thrower miss entirely. The stick lands several paces away. The child looks disappointed. An older sibling retrieves it and demonstrates the motion again. No criticism, no frustration, just repetition. The movement becomes slightly better, then slightly better again. Many human abilities emerge this way, not through sudden mastery, through countless attempts. The valley itself becomes a teacher. The river teaches caution. The weather teaches preparation. The animals teach observation. The landscape rewards attention and punishes carelessness. Children absorb these lessons gradually, often without realizing they're learning at all. By midday, the camp settles into a slower rhythm. The youngest children nap beneath shade. Adults work nearby. The older children continue exploring. You sit beside the river and watch 2 girls collecting smooth stones. They compare shapes, sizes, colors. One stone is chosen, another rejected, then chosen again. The criteria remain mysterious. Perhaps beauty, perhaps usefulness, perhaps simply preference. Human beings have always enjoyed collecting interesting objects. A surprising number of ancient sites contain items that seem to have been valued for reasons beyond immediate survival. Shells, pigments, unusual stones, animal teeth, and decorative objects appear again and again across vast stretches of time. Even children likely notice beauty, perhaps especially children. The afternoon drifts onward. Warm sunlight fills the valley. Grass bends beneath a steady breeze. The river sparkles. A group of children follows an elder toward the painted rock shelter. You join them. The paintings remain visible beneath the overhang. The colours seem softer now than they did during the night. The elder points toward one image, then another. The children listen carefully. You cannot understand every word, but you understand the moment. The images are becoming part of memory, part of identity, part of the shared understanding of the world. What matters here is not merely survival, it is continuity, the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. Without that transfer, every child would need to rediscover everything. Every edible plant, every useful root, every safe shelter, every tool-making technique, every story. Instead, knowledge accumulates. The camp becomes wiser than any individual. The afternoon slowly gives way to evening. Children return carrying sticks, stones, questions, and endless observations. Adults prepare food. Smoke rises into the cooling air. The familiar fire grows brighter as darkness approaches. One by one, the younger children become quieter. The day's adventures begin catching up with them. A small boy falls asleep before finishing a story. A girl leans against her mother and watches the flames. Another child struggles heroically against sleep for several minutes before losing the battle completely. The fire crackles softly. Voices lower. Stars appear overhead. You look around the camp and realize that adaptation is not only about surviving difficult conditions today. It is about ensuring someone knows how to survive tomorrow. The shelters, the tools, the stories, the roots, the songs, the painted images, everything you have seen ultimately flows toward the next generation, like the river moving through the valley, always changing, always continuing. And beneath the ancient stars, the children of this vanished world quietly inherit a future they cannot yet imagine. By morning, the camp feels slower, not frightened, not broken, just softer around one small shelter near the fire. You notice it before anyone explains. People move carefully there, voices lower when they pass. A child who usually runs between the shelters is gently guided around that space instead of through it. Smoke drifts across the entrance and then lifts into the pale air. Inside, someone is unwell. The world continues as always. The river moves. Birds call. Children whisper. The fire needs feeding. Roots need cleaning. Tools need repairing. Yet the rhythm of camp has changed. Because one person's weakness has become everyone's concern. You step closer, quietly. An older woman sits near the shelter entrance, holding a small bundle of plants. Another person warms stones near the fire. A hide covering has been arranged to block the morning wind. Inside, in the dimness, a figure rests beneath layers of skin, breathing unevenly but peacefully. There is no hospital here, no pharmacy, no clean white room with humming machines. But there is care. Care in the way water is brought. Care in the way warmth is managed. Care in the way the sick person is not left alone. Time would preserve only fragments of such moments. A healed injury in an ancient bone, a body that survived long after trauma, traces of plant use, though often faint and difficult to interpret. These clues suggest that care and support were not rare accidents in human life. They were part of how groups endured. The older woman crushes leaves between her fingers. The smell is sharp and green. She mixes them with water in a small hollow of stone. Whether the mixture heals, soothes, cools, or simply comforts is hard for you to know. Perhaps it does several things. Perhaps some plant knowledge here is effective. Perhaps some is symbolic. Perhaps the difference does not feel as sharp to the people using it. The sick person stirs. Someone speaks softly. A hand rests against their shoulder. The touch is gentle, steady, familiar. A small detail lies hidden in this kind of scene. Survival in deep prehistory was not only about strength. A person with an injured leg, a bad tooth, a fever, or old age might still live because others shared food, protection, warmth, and time. Compassion could become practical. Practical care could become emotional. Human life has always blurred those lines. You sit near the fire and watch warm stones being shifted with sticks. One is wrapped carefully in hide, not too hot, not too cool, and carried toward the shelter. Heat becomes medicine of a simple kind. Warmth eases discomfort. Warmth protects. Warmth reassures. Nearby, children remain unusually quiet. They understand more than adults sometimes imagine, which has been inconvenient for adults across all of history. One child asks a question. An elder answers softly. Another child gathers dry grass without being told and brings it to the fire. The camp responds as body responds. Energy flows toward the place of need. Someone else takes over food preparation. Another repairs a tool left unfinished. A young person fetches water from the river. The usual tasks continue, but they are redistributed. That, too, is adaptation. Not every challenge comes from weather, animals, or hunger. Sometimes the danger is inside the body. Pain, fever, injury, weakness, exhaustion. The group cannot remove every risk, but it can soften some of them. By midday, sunlight warms the ground outside the shelter. The sick person sleeps. Their breathing sounds steadier now, or perhaps you simply hope it does. The camp relaxes slightly, though not completely. You walk with two others toward the edge of the woodland to gather more plants. The path is familiar from earlier days. Wet leaves cling to shaded soil. The smell of earth rises underfoot. Insects hum in patches of sun. The person leading the search moves slowly, choosing certain leaves and ignoring others that look almost identical to you. Plant knowledge carries danger and promise together. Some plants nourish, some poison, some soothe, some do nothing except taste heroic and unpleasant. Some may help only in ways too subtle to see. The trail of certainty grows faint here. Later researchers can identify seeds, pollen, residues, and plant remains in certain conditions, but the full medical knowledge of people without writing is difficult to recover. What they believed, what worked, what failed, and what was repeated because it brought comfort, all of it lies partly beyond reach. Still, the care itself is visible in the arrangement of the day. That matters. You return with leaves, roots, and bark. The air has cooled again. Clouds gather over distant hills. The fire is being kept steady. Food is being prepared quietly. The sick shelter remains the center of attention without becoming the center of noise. A child brings a small object and places it near the entrance. A shell from the coast. Perhaps a gift. Perhaps a charm. Perhaps simply something beautiful. No one moves it away. You feel the tenderness of that gesture. In modern life, illness often becomes private, hidden behind doors, forms, appointments, and messages that say, "Hope you feel better soon." Here, illness remains part of the shared camp. Not necessarily easy, not romantic, but communal. Evening comes slowly. The sky turns pale gold, then grey, then deep blue. The river darkens. The first stars appear above the trees. Smoke rises straight upward now that the wind has settled. The sick person wakes for a little while. Someone helps them drink. Someone speaks quietly, perhaps telling a familiar story. Another person adjusts the coverings. A few children watch from a respectful distance, solemn as tiny elders. The fire glows. Faces gather near it, though more subdued than usual. There is no music tonight, no playful rhythm, only low voices and the small sounds of care. Water poured, hide shifted, wood placed gently on coals, a breath listened for. The meaning reveals itself slowly. Humans adapted to a vanished world because they learned not only how to endure hardship, but how to carry one another through it. A lone person might be strong for a day. A group can be strong across generations. The night deepens. The shelter remains warm. The sick person sleeps again. No one knows what morning will bring, and the uncertainty is accepted with quiet patience. The camp cannot command life to be gentle. It can only answer with warmth, attention, and presence. You sit beside the embers and listen to the river beyond the dark. Its sound is steady, almost comforting, and inside the small circle of firelight, care becomes another kind of shelter. Not made from branches, not made from hides, made from hands, memory, and the decision not to leave someone alone in the cold. The season is changing. You feel it before anyone says a word. The mornings arrive colder now. Mist lingers longer above the river. The grass that once bent softly beneath warm breezes now carries a sharper edge when touched by dawn. Birds gather differently. Some voices that filled the valley weeks ago have grown less common. Others appear more frequently. The camp notices. Of course it does. The camp notices everything. You step from the shelter before sunrise and stand beside the dying embers of the fire. The air feels crisp against your skin. Your breath appears briefly in the darkness. Beyond the camp, the river moves through pale fog like a memory half hidden from sight. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then you hear it, a distant call, not from a bird, not from a person, an animal somewhere beyond the hills. The sound fades quickly, yet it feels important. The world is shifting, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. Over the following days, the changes become harder to ignore. Certain plants have already finished their growing season. Areas that seemed rich with food a short time ago now offer less. Animal tracks appear in different places. The familiar herd routes have begun to drift toward other valleys. You walk beside several hunters one morning and notice how often they pause. Not because they are confused, because they are comparing what they see with what they remember. Memory has become a measuring tool. The grass is shorter here than before. The stream is lower. The animals crossed farther west. The berries ripened earlier. The cold arrived sooner. Tiny observations accumulate. Together they form a picture. You climb a ridge overlooking the valley. From here, the landscape seems unchanged at first glance. The river still winds through the lowlands. The trees still stand along the banks. The shelters still cluster near the fire. Yet once you know where to look, the differences become visible. Nature is rearranging itself, slowly, patiently. The people around you do not resist the process. They respond to it. A group begins discussing another valley several days' journey away. An elder remembers visiting it years ago. Someone else recalls a water source nearby. A younger hunter remembers seeing fresh tracks in that direction during a previous season. The conversation unfolds around memory. The future is being planned through recollection. You begin to understand that adaptation often looks ordinary while it is happening. Later generations may speak of climate shifts, migrations, environmental pressures, and changing ecosystems. The people living through those changes simply notice that the river feels different this year, or that the animals arrived late, or that the cold seems stronger. Large transformations often arrive disguised as small inconveniences. The camp continues preparing. More hides are repaired. Additional firewood is collected. Food is stored carefully. Routes are discussed repeatedly. Children listen while pretending not to. The painted shelter remains part of daily life. The river remains familiar. The fire remains central. Yet the atmosphere has changed. Everyone is looking slightly farther ahead. One afternoon, you follow a small group to a section of grassland where animals once grazed regularly. The place feels strangely empty. Wind moves through the dry stems. Cloud shadows drift across the ground. But the animals are gone. Not permanently, just elsewhere. The absence feels meaningful. You stand quietly beside the others. Nobody appears surprised. Disappointed, perhaps. Thoughtful, certainly. But not surprised. The world has always changed. Human life has always required adjustment. A person points toward distant hills. Another nods. The group turns and begins walking. Decision made. No ceremony required. The answer has arrived through observation. As the days pass, more signs appear. The nights grow longer. The air carries different scents. Flocks move overhead in patterns you've not seen before. The river occasionally reveals exposed stones that were hidden beneath higher water weeks earlier. Children continue playing. Adults continue working. Stories continue around the fire. Life remains recognizable. Yet beneath the familiar routines, preparation continues, without realizing it. You've been watching one of humanity's most important abilities. Flexibility, not strength alone, not intelligence alone. Flexibility, the willingness to alter plans when circumstances change, the willingness to move when staying becomes difficult, the willingness to learn from the environment instead of arguing with it. Modern people sometimes imagine adaptation as a heroic event, a dramatic breakthrough, a single brilliant solution. The reality is often quieter. One route abandoned, another route chosen, one food source replaced, one shelter adjusted, one lesson remembered. Thousands of small changes eventually become survival. The camp begins gathering equipment for a future journey. Not immediately, soon. Bundles are checked. Tools are repaired. Useful items are kept close. The preparations unfold gradually enough that the children still find time to play and chase one another through the grass. Yet everyone understands what's happening. The valley may no longer provide what it once did. Another place may now offer better opportunities. That is not failure. It is adaptation. One evening you sit beside the river as sunset paints the water gold. The current moves steadily around familiar stones. Insects hover above the surface. The first stars appear overhead. You think about everything you've seen here. The shelters, the tools, the stories, the children, the music, the painted images, the care shown during illness. All of it remains important. Yet none of it exists in isolation. Everything depends on responding to change. The river changes. The seasons change. The animals change. The landscape changes. And so people change too. The fire glows behind you. Smoke drifts upward into the evening sky. Voices carry softly across the camp. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs. The sound feels reassuring. Tomorrow may bring another journey, another valley, another river, another campfire. The exact location matters less than you once believed, because the true strength of these people was never tied to one place. It lived inside their knowledge, their relationships, their memory, their ability to notice when the world had shifted and respond accordingly. Night settles gently across the valley. The stars brighten. The river continues its endless movement. And as you watch the darkness gather beyond the camp, you realize that this vanished world was never truly still. It was always changing. The remarkable thing is that humans learned how to change with it. The morning arrives clear and cold. For a few moments, everything appears unchanged. The river still winds through the valley. Mist still hangs above the water. The shelters still stand around the familiar fire. Birds still call from the trees. Children still wake reluctantly while adults begin the day's work. Yet beneath the familiar surface, something has already shifted. The camp is preparing to leave, not in haste, not in fear, simply because the time has come. You stand beside the river and watch the first light spread across the water. Golden reflections tremble on the surface before breaking apart in the current. The air smells of wet earth, smoke, and distant grass touched by frost. Behind you, people move quietly through camp. Bundles are checked. Tools are gathered. Useful materials are sorted. Nothing is wasted. Nothing important is forgotten. The process feels practiced. This is not the first departure, nor will it be the last. You walk slowly among the shelters. Many of them already look different. Sleeping places have been cleared. Loose materials have been packed. Items that once seemed permanent reveal their temporary nature. The camp has always been a moment rather than a monument. That realization stays with you. When modern people imagine history, they often think of ruins, temples, walls, cities, roads, structures large enough to survive, yet most human lives unfolded in places like this. Places that disappeared almost completely after people moved on. Places remembered through stories long before they were remembered through archaeology. A child carries a small bundle nearly as large as themselves. The effort is admirable. The efficiency is questionable. An adult quietly removes half the load and redistributes it elsewhere. The child looks mildly offended. Human dignity has always been vulnerable to practical realities. The sun climbs higher. The valley grows brighter. One by one, familiar tasks are completed for the last time. Water is collected. The fire is maintained. Food is prepared. Children are counted repeatedly, which remains a timeless precaution whenever travel approaches. Nearby, the painted shelter stands unchanged. You find yourself drawn there again. The images still rest beneath the overhang. Animals, lines, shapes, memories fixed in pigment. The people passing nearby glance at them occasionally, not because they are unusual, because they are familiar, part of the landscape now, part of the group's memory. The paintings may remain here long after the camp disappears. Rain will come, seasons will pass, grass will grow and die, animals will cross the valley, generations will move elsewhere. Yet the images may endure. You place a hand against the cool stone beside them, not touching the paintings, just the rock itself. It feels solid, ancient, patient. The same cannot be said of human life. Human life moves, changes, adapts, leaves, returns, continues. As the day progresses, the camp slowly dissolves. That is the strangest thing. Nothing dramatic marks the moment. No farewell speech. No grand ceremony. People simply begin walking. A group leaves first. Others follow. The fire is reduced carefully. Useful materials are taken. The shelters remain standing for now, though they already feel abandoned. You join the movement away from the river. The familiar valley stretches behind you. The route ahead curves through grassland toward distant hills. Children walk beside parents. Elders move steadily. Tools hang from carrying straps. Bundles shift with each step. The pace is calm, almost reflective. You look back one final time. The river glitters in the sunlight. Smoke rises faintly from the last embers. The shelters appear smaller than you expected. Distance works quickly. Already the camp seems less permanent than it felt yesterday. Perhaps that is the final lesson of this vanished world. Nothing remains unchanged. Not rivers, not coastlines, not climates, not animals, not camps, not people. The world you have spent these weeks exploring no longer exists. The valleys changed. The river shifted. The shorelines moved. The grasslands transformed. Entire ecosystems rose and faded. Many creatures disappeared. Others adapted. The landscape itself became something new. Yet something endured. Not the exact places. Not the exact routes. Not the exact tools. The capacity to adapt endured. You continue walking. The hills grow closer. Wind moves through dry grass around your legs. Cloud shadows drift across the ground. The group ahead spreads into a long line across the landscape. Seen from a distance, they appear small. Yet their influence will be enormous. Future generations will inherit their decisions, their knowledge, their resilience, their willingness to learn from changing conditions. Without realizing it, you have spent 20 sections watching the foundation of humanity's greatest strength. Not dominance, not power, not certainty. Adaptability. The ability to adjust when the river changes course. The ability to move when resources shift. The ability to teach children what matters. The ability to cooperate. The ability to imagine. The ability to remember. The ability to begin again. The afternoon light softens. The valley behind you becomes a distant shape. Ahead lies another landscape. Another camp. Another fire. Another set of decisions. The journey never truly ends. It simply continues in different forms. Eventually the group pauses on a ridge. The view stretches endlessly beneath the sky. You stop beside them and look back one last time. The old valley is barely visible now. A thin ribbon of water, a patch of trees, a memory. Yet it feels strangely close, because the people who live there are not entirely gone. Their shelters vanished. Their footprints vanished. Their voices vanished. But something of them remains. In every story shared beside a fire, in every lesson passed to a child, in every adaptation made in response to a changing world, in every human being who learned that survival depends not on resisting change, but on moving with it. The wind passes across the ridge, the grass bends, the travellers continue forward, and as the vanished world slowly disappears behind the horizon, you carry its most important inheritance with you. The quiet understanding that humanity survived not because the world stayed the same, but because people learned how to change when it did. The fire behind you grows smaller now. The travellers move softly into the fading light, and the old valley rests behind them like a dream already beginning to blur. The river still moves there. The grass still bends. The painted stone still waits beneath its quiet overhang. Nothing hurries. Nothing asks to be remembered too loudly. You breathe in the cool evening air. Smoke lingers faintly on your clothing. Dust rests on your feet. Somewhere beyond the ridge, another campfire will be made. Another shelter will rise. Another child will fall asleep before the story ends. And slowly, the vanished world becomes gentle, not lost in a frightening way, only folded into time. The people continue onward beneath the stars, carrying tools, food, memories, and one another. The night opens around them, wide and calm. Above, the sky shines with patient light. Below, the earth holds every footprint for a moment, then lets it go. You may let it go too. The cold river, the quiet shelters, the glowing fire, the soft voices, the ancient hands shaping stone, the children learning by watching, the long grass moving in the wind. Everything settles, everything becomes still, and as the darkness deepens, you can rest with one peaceful thought. Humanity has always walked through change, one careful step at a time. The fire fades, the stars remain. Sweet dreams.